Chapter 251. Go after him and kill him. Qin Shui, kill him. You must kill him. Qin Nihu held his severed arm and howled miserably. He is the deputy chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters. If we let him return to Meng Fortress, all of us will be severely punished by the military law, or at least exiled for life. You must kill him. He is severely wounded, and his energy is almost depleted. You must kill him. Qin Nihu roared furiously at Qin Shui, who was running wildly behind him. Sinecures, save me. Save me. My arm. Put it back on. Put it back on. Sai, hurry up and save them. Wake them up. Both Earth Immortals coughed out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Forcing their bodies, which were wounded by Wu Qi's talismans, they staggered back to Qin Nihu. Without hesitation, they found Qin Nihu's severed arm and helped him reattach it to his shoulder. However, Wu Qi's sword beam was too powerful. Not only had it severed his arm, it had also corroded and devoured a part of his flesh near the wound. The severed arm found by the two Earth Immortals was as shriveled as a reed stick. Without some rare and precious pills, even if Qin Nihu could reattach his arm, he would not be able to use it freely for the rest of his life. It would also be a great obstacle to his future cultivation base. Looking at his deformed arm, Qin Nihu threw his head back and howled furiously. However, as he was severely wounded, he was a little short of breath. His howls and curses were only a little louder than a cat's meow. Apart from Qin Nihu, who had his arm severed, there were 12 other Jindan human immortals lying on the ground. The power unleashed by Wu Qi's talismans was comparable to the full force strike of an Earth Immortal of mid-stage nascent soul realm. Although 2 nascent soul cultivators had withstood over 70% of the power, the remaining 30% had still shattered their limbs, and a few human immortals of Jindan were on the verge of death. Struggling, the 2 Earth Immortals ran back to them, and hastily took out handfuls of pills and shoved them into the mouths of these human immortals, fearing that if a few of them died, they would not be able to answer to Qin Nihu when they returned. Wu Qi, I'm going to tear you to pieces. Bringing with him a large group of beast warriors, Qin Shui ran past Qin Nihu like a herd of mad bulls. As he sprinted, he roared, Ancestor, rest assured, this Wu Qi is dead for sure today. I want to hack him into 1,000 pieces. A serpent cry soared into the sky, as the beast soul of the dark nether python flew out from behind Qin Shui's back, its 3 huge serpent heads swaying in the air. A chilly wind rose around Qin Shui's body, as the aura emanating from him suddenly rose to the peak stage of Gold Core realm. The soul of the dark hellish python had almost solidified. It spat out poisonous mist and chilly wind as it chased after Wu Qi. Yingzheng could not wait any longer and rose to his feet from the dragon throne. Looking at Qin Shui through the light screen, he praised, Not bad, Artiqin also has a set of cultivation technique to cultivate beast souls and beast warriors. However, as he was able to cultivate a beast soul to a level comparable to a Jindan level human immortal, it is obvious that this Qin Shui has received a lot of help from Qin Weiyang. It is not so easy to cultivate a beast soul. With the 3 snake heads swaying behind Qin Shui's back, he brought several dozens of beast warriors of scouting office and chased after Wu Qi. This time, with the help of the pills, Wu Qi had condensed a little bit of energy and fled to a distance of over 2 miles away, coming out from behind a mountain ridge in the distance. There was a sword wound on his chest, and blood was gushing out from his waist and abdomen. Faintly, some intestines and internal organs could be seen flowing out of the wound. Right after he came out from the ground, Qin Shui caught up with him while cursing furiously, and was now less than 1,000 feet away from Wu Qi. Abruptly, Wu Qi turned his head, opened his mouth, and shot out the acquired pearls of earth element and wood element, transforming into 2 bright beams, one yellow and the other green, smashing viciously towards Qin Shui. The acquired pearls of earth element and wood element struck onto Qin Shui's body, exploding into a ball of green thunderbolt. The explosion made the nether python behind Qin Shui throw its head back and let out a long hiss into the sky, while spraying out a large amount of poisonous mist. The nether python opened its huge eyes and shot out 3 pitch-black energy arrows from its 3 mouths. Two of them knocked the pearls of earth element and wood element flying far away, while the last one pierced through the air and accurately pierced through Wu Qi's back, piercing into his body. The nether python's huge eyes opened, and 3 pitch-black energy arrows shot out from its 3 mouths. 2 of the energy arrows knocked the pearls of earth element and wood element flying far away, while the last one pierced through the air and accurately pierced right into Wu Qi's back, drilling into his body. The nether python's beast soul contained an extremely poisonous aura, and in an instant, Wu Qi's skin turned black. The blood that oozed out from his body had also turned from bright red to a pale black. Wu Qi's movement slowed down abruptly, and he did not even have the strength to run anymore. 3 beast warriors of scouting office let out a long and sonorous cry. Behind their backs, red clouds intertwined, transforming into 3 clumps of raging flame and leaped towards Wu Qi. Swinging their blades, they aimed at Wu Qi's neck, waist, and knees. With a somersault, Wu Qi dodged the attacks from 3 beast warriors, then thrust the sword of Greedy Wolf out with a jarring whistle. A sword beam streaked across the air, slicing all 3 beast warriors in half from the waist. Blood splashed in all directions, and the 3 beast warriors roared furiously. Suddenly, their dantians swelled up, and with 3 loud popping noises, their upper bodies exploded. The self-explosion of 3 peak stage Xiantian beast warriors had knocked Wu Qi several hundred feet away. Ying Zheng was laughing happily. He kept looking at Wu Qi on the light screen, who was bathed in blood and fighting fiercely. A large dark cloud had emerged underneath his feet. Qin Qingshui let out a strange laugh and said, "Wu Qi, if not for you peeking at that pretty girl bathing, how could you be so careless and be severely wounded by my assassin? Hee, that girl must be Xiang Yu's beloved concubine, right? I can't believe you actually slept with such a peerless beauty last time. You're really lucky with women." With the flame of jealousy burning in his heart, Qin Qingshui sprinted forward and gave a powerful kick to Wu Qi's face, who had yet to land on the ground. A crisp cracking noise rang out, as the muscles on Wu Qi's face were torn by the powerful force. Blood splashed and splashed in all directions. Wu Qi let out a miserable howl, gave Qin Qingshui a venomous glare, and forced himself to perform an incantation gesture to summon the Earth Spirit Pearl back. He transformed the pearl into a clump of yellow mist and wrapped around his body, then plunged back into the ground. But this time, right after Wu Qi plunged back into the ground, Qin Qingshui threw his head back and let out a long hiss into the sky like a great serpent. Suddenly, his fists were shrouded in a very dense, dark green poisonous gas, and there were some lightning sparks flashing vaguely within it. 2 Yin thunders, which contained strong poison, flew out from his fists and thudded heavily into the ground. Along with a thunderous rumble, the ground within a radius of 1 mile exploded. Hundreds of feet thick mud and rocks were blown up into the air, and countless pieces of rocks fell down. Wu Qi's body was sent flying up from the ground, with blood spurting out from his body. He seemed to have fainted, and was sent flying hundreds of feet away by the explosion. "Wu Qi, Duke of Tunyun, you are destined to die in my hands." Even Qin Qingshui's eyes were shining brightly. Behind his back, the soul of the netherworld boa suddenly expanded to hundreds of feet tall, widely opened its jaws, and swallowed Wu Qi whole. The body of the netherworld boa squirmed, and suddenly, a large amount of black saliva dripped down from its jaws, merging with Qin Qingshui's body bit by bit. The power released from Qin Qingshui's body suddenly swelled up. He raised his head and gave a high-pitched roar towards the sky. Suddenly, a tiny slit appeared between his eyebrows, from which a 3-inch tall, tiny humanoid figure darted out. Judging from the appearance of the humanoid figure, it was obviously another Qin Qingshui. The humanoid figure flew up into the sky and landed right in the middle of the head of the netherworld boa. The feet of the tiny humanoid figure melted into dark smoke, merging with the soul of the netherworld boa. The smile on Ying Zheng's face became brighter and brighter. "Oh, that little thief who stole my spirit item was killed just like that? Hee, devouring the soul of a beast, transforming his body and condensing his energy, this Qin Qingshui is a lucky man." Very few beast warriors can break through the limitation of Jin Dan and grow into nascent soul realm. He is a lucky man. I'm sure this Wu Qi has some other spirit items with him, or else, it would be impossible for him to provide such an enormous amount of energy for him to make the breakthrough. Before his words could fade away, Qin Qingshui's body suddenly trembled in the light screen. The three-headed python above his head opened its jaws, and suddenly, 2 more heads grew out from its neck. 5 heads of the python opened up slowly, and 5 acquired spirit pearls were vaguely visible in their mouths, emanating an enormous amount of acquired energies of 5 elements, the Yuan Ling energies. All the ministers around Yingzheng gasped at the same time, while Baiqi cursed furiously. No wonder this little fellow is so difficult to deal with. He actually managed to gather all the acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. What a pity, this Qin Qingshui is the lucky one. Bastard. Even I don't have any acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. Yingzheng looked at the changing expressions of all his ministers and generals around him, then suddenly threw his head back and let out a loud laughter. Pass down my decree, order the scouts of Yulin army to follow the direction where Wu Qi and his companions fled, and find out if there is anyone taking a bath in the mountains. Zhang Yi, bring some men and capture that little fellow alive. If I remember correctly, that little fellow still has a clump of innate earth element energy essence, right? Take it and keep it with you, nourishing it day and night. It will be enough to bring your acquired magnetic force to a higher level. Zhang Yi was overjoyed, and he quickly bowed and answered. He smiled and said, Your Majesty, please rest assured that I will definitely bring back your treasure. On the light screen, Qin Qingshui was seen taking out a black ring from the big mouth of the beast soul, which looked like a coiling dragon. He was fiddling with it carefully in his hand. Yingzheng looked at the black dragon spirit ring, and his face turned extremely unsightly. Zhang Yi snorted coldly as well. Stepping on a cloud, he brought several dozens of cultivators under his command and hastily chased after Qin Qingshui and his companions. Meanwhile, Yingzheng cupped his fist at Yu Yao and said with a smile, Yu Yao, lend me a hand and capture that Yu Ji. Yu Yao shook her head with a cold grin and said, Your Majesty is not here to capture Yu Ji alive, but to capture that Li Yuan, am I right? Since Yu Ji is there, Li Yuan is most likely there as well. But that's fine, as the 3 of us sisters can reunite again. She laughed coldly and glared fiercely at Yingzheng, then directly gave an order to Baiqi, Wang Jian, and some other generals of Qin army, sending out a batch of elite soldiers of the Qin dynasty to protect Yingzheng's chariot as they quickly flew up into the sky on a cloud. Beneath the cloud, amidst the woods, the scouts of Qin army and Yan army were still fighting and killing each other. But all of a sudden, large groups of Qin practitioners and cultivators from various sects rushed out like a tidal wave, wiping out all the scouts of Yan army in just a blink of an eye. Wherever Yingzheng's chariot went, the scouts of Yan army, who were fighting with the Qin scouts just now, were all killed in just a blink of an eye. In just 15 minutes, Yingzheng had arrived at the blessed land chosen by Wu Qi a few days ago. Several thousand soldiers of Great Chu were stationed quietly in a valley 10 miles away. All of them sat cross-legged on the ground, motionless and motionless. Amidst a pool of 17 hot springs that looked like a pearl necklace, Yu Ji, Li Yuan, and several dozens of pretty and adorable serving ladies were soaking lazily in the hot springs. Separated by a rock ridge that stood about 10 feet tall, on a small grassland next to the lake, a large curtain was tied up using luxurious black brocade. Qi Bin and Lu Mei, together with several dozens of serving ladies, each wearing a tall crown on their head and clad in black robes, were sitting behind the curtain, drinking tea and enjoying the scenery. Vaguely, several hundred shadows of wild ghosts and deities could be seen hovering next to the curtain. Sitting in the chariot, Yingzheng gazed at the curtain from afar, his eyes narrowed into a thin line as he said, Are those 2 ladies the imperial concubines of Great Chu that I saw when I was wiping out the mighty army of Xiong dynasty? Yu Yao sighed lightly, shook her head and said, Well, you've taken advantage of me again. In those years, the harem of all 6 dynasties were gathered in Xianyang City. Don't tell me you're still planning to do the same thing today? Yingzheng just laughed aloud, throwing his arms around Yu Yao's waist. Chapter 252. The scouting office had its own set of rules for collecting the bodies of the dead. Together with a group of his subordinates, Qin Qingshui collected all the broken bodies of the 3 beast warriors who had self-detonated, then sprinkled some specially made phosphorescent powder on them. A greenish phosphorescent flame burst into life, silently burning the pile of corpses into ashes. A few beast warriors took out a small black porcelain jar, collected the ashes on the ground, and tied the jar tightly behind their backs with ropes. Qin Qingshui stood before 3 scorch marks on the ground, then said in a deep voice, "You can leave with peace of mind. Wu Qi's soul has been destroyed, and turned into the nourishment of the beast souls. Rest assured, brothers. I'll take good care of your family members." Casually, he tossed the black dragon spirit ring into the air and spun it a few times in his palm. Grinning coldly, Qin Qingshui said, "With this ring alone, I'll make sure your clan members will live a rich and prosperous life." A few miles behind them, Qin Nihu was seen staggering towards them, holding his arm, which was barely reattached with a plaster. Next to him were 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and 12 human immortals of Jindan realm, but they could barely walk. From afar, Qin Nihu roared out, "Qingshui, what are you still talking about? Retreat now. All of us are severely wounded now. If we bump into some experts from Qin army, we will be finished." Qin Qingshui took a deep breath, and a panicked look emerged on his horse-like face. He waved his hands and cried out, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat now! Damn it! For the sake of killing a mere Wu Qi, I can't believe you have come to Qin army's territory. Brothers, retreat now!" Clang! A clang of a blade rang out, as a Qin scout leaped out from the bushes behind them, slashing a beast warrior of scouting office in half from the waist with his blade. Hiding in the bushes nearby, several dozens of Qin scouts sprung up into the air. One of their leaders shouted out sternly, "Great General's order, kill!" The Qin scouts who sprung up into the air pulled out their blades and hacked down like mad tigers. The beast warriors of the scouting office were caught unprepared, and 5 of them were killed on the spot. Behind them, more Qin scouts rushed out from the dense forest, holding strong crossbows in their hands. Hundreds of bolts were shot out, the arrowheads densely covered with various runes and energy stones. The explosive power of these bolts was almost equal to the attack of a Jindan cultivator. Qin Qingshui and the others were thrown into confusion, and a dozen more beast warriors were hit by the bolts. The runes attached to the arrows exploded. Raging flames, ice, thunderbolts, all sorts of attacks of 5 elements blasted the bodies of these beast warriors into pieces, killing them on the spot. Qin Qingshui roared furiously, while the 2-headed dark nether python behind his back threw its head back and gave a long cry into the sky, opening all 5 mouths at the same time and shooting out countless pitch-black energy arrows, hitting accurately onto the bodies of these Qin scouts. The energy arrows exploded with a deafening rumble, and a deadly poisonous aura spread in all directions. All the Qin scouts who rushed out from the forest fell to the ground, howling miserably. Their bodies were attacked by the poisonous aura, and their skin was corroded and sunken. Their muscles and bones were rotting rapidly, and very soon, their bodies had turned into puddles of pus. Qin Nihu, who was rushing towards them, was struck dumb. He howled almost hysterically, "You bastards! You think you can touch us with just the likes of you? Kill them!" He waved his uninjured arm, unleashing a tiger-shaped energy whistling out from his palm. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, it plowed a several feet deep trench on the ground, then leaped into the ranks of Qin scouts who were holding strong crossbows. A tiger roar towered into the sky. The tiger-shaped energy unleashed by Qin Nihu suddenly exploded, shooting out in all directions like countless shooting stars. The energy smashed into the bodies of the Qin scouts, causing their bodies to expand and explode, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood. Qin Nihu laughed hideously, threw his head back and howled, "How dare you little bugs touch us? Don't you know how to spell the word death?" Suddenly, an invisible and tremendous force came crashing down from the sky, pressing Qin Nihu several hundred feet deep into the ground with a deep, muffled boom. Qin Nihu gave a miserable howl, as at least 40% of his bones were broken. The tremendous pressure had rendered him unable to move, and his muscles and blood vessels were flattened and pressed tightly against his bones. Blood kept bursting out from all over his body, and in just a blink of an eye, he had turned into a bloody man. Together with several dozens of cultivators, Zhang Yi descended from the sky. Invisible magnetic forces were wheeling and wheeling around Zhang Yi, producing deep, muffled noises that sounded like the rumbling of thunder. All the natural energies in the surrounding mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins were absorbed into Zhang Yi's body. After being transformed by his magnetic grand magic, they were transformed into a mighty force that enveloped an area of 1 mile in circumference. Like a god who could decide the fate of all living beings, Zhang Yi hovered midair and looked down at Qin Nihu and his company. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "A bunch of juniors bullying you is truly delightful." While laughing strangely, Zhang Yi stretched out his right hand towards Qin Qingshui, who had his eyes and mouth wide open, and said, "Young lad, hand over the Black Dragon Spirit Ring and 5 acquired Spirit Pearls. In short, hand over all the belongings left behind by Wu Qi, and I'll let you die in one piece." Qin Qingshui gave a strange cry, then suddenly pulled out a 3 feet long, large spirit talisman carved out of yellow spirit jade. He bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the yellow jade, then smashed the spirit talisman forcefully onto the ground. A stream of yellow mist soared up from the ground, wrapping around Qin Qingshui, Qin Nihu, and all the others. In just a blink of an eye, they had burrowed into the ground and fled several miles away. It was a 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman, crafted by an earth immortal of heavenly spirit sect, a spirit talisman that was specially given to the juniors of his sect to save their lives and escape from danger. Zhang Yi's magnetic force was produced by absorbing the power of the earth. It could restrain all metals and drive the natural energies of the earth. However, it was helpless against a spirit talisman of such a high grade. In just a blink of an eye, Qin Qingshui and his company had fled several miles away. Zhang Yi was taken aback for a moment, and only then did he come to his senses. He cursed under his breath, then brought all his subordinates and quickly chased after Qin Qingshui and his company. Using a great amount of magnetic force that was as fine as gossamer threads, Zhang Yi's enormous divine will scanned every inch of the underground scene. All the changes of the natural energies underground emerged in his mind. Following the energy ripples emanating from the 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman, Zhang Yi soon covered a distance of over 2,000 miles. Ahead of them was a great river with rolling waves. Right at the edge of the river, a clump of yellow mist rushed out from the ground. Qin Qingshui and his company were thrown out by the yellow mist in a sorry state, falling and sprawling on the ground. The 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman was a high-grade talisman. When traveling underground, the speed was very fast, and the pressure was very great. Even with the overall strength of Qin Qingshui and his company, they could not withstand the sudden change of speed. Each and every one of them fell to the ground and threw up as if they were drunk, unable to stand up for a long time. Zhang Yi laughed out loud. Complacently, he waved his hand, transforming the magnetic force into a huge invisible hand, grabbing forcefully towards Qin Qingshui. Black Dragon Spirit Ring. 5 Element Spirit Pearls. Innate Earth Element Energy Essence. When Zhang Yi thought of those treasures carried by Wu Qi, his body trembled with excitement. The Black Dragon Spirit Ring was Ying Zheng's personal treasure, and if he could retrieve it and present it to Ying Zheng, it would be a great merit. The Spirit Pearls of 5 elements could be given to the juniors of the clan, as they were a good item that could strengthen the overall strength of the clan. Even with the entire storage of the Deqin dynasty, there were only about 30 to 50 of these acquired spirit pearls, and they had long been divided by many important ministers. On average, a wealthy clan did not even have one. As for the innate earth element energy essence, Zhang Yi did not have the overall strength to refine it now, but he could bring it into his dantian and slowly absorb the innate earth element energy essence to nourish his body. He was cultivating the acquired magnetic grand magic, which seized the natural forces and transformed them into magnetic forces, giving him unfathomable divine abilities. If he could transform his body into the innate earth element Tao body, he would be able to cultivate the innate magnetic force, and his divine abilities and magical powers would be improved by more than 100 times. They are all good treasures. Although Zhang Yi had cultivated arduously for over 2,000 years, he still could not restrain the excitement in his heart. Impatiently he grabbed towards Qin Qingshui, transformed into a beam of dark light, and quickly approached Qin Qingshui and his company. All of a sudden, those beast warriors of scouting office, who were fleeing with Qin Qingshui and his company, threw their heads back and let out shrill cries. Then, they sprung up and charged towards Zhang Yi with their sword beams. Zhang Yi was thrown into confusion by the sudden turn of events, and failed to react to what was happening. In just a blink of an eye, Zhang Yi, who had his attention fully focused on Qin Qingshui, was caught by these beast warriors. Their bodies expanded at the same time, and then exploded like bombs. Dark blood sprayed out from their bodies, bringing with it a pungent smell of blood. Surprisingly, a sword beam that was equal to the full force strike of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator burst out from each of their bodies, slashing viciously onto Zhang Yi's escape beam. Men of sacrifice. The trap. Suddenly, these two words popped up in Zhang Yi's mind. He gave a sharp cry, and all the mountains within 100 miles suddenly trembled and crumbled. An enormous amount of energy from the underground energy veins rushed crazily into his body, transforming into an enormous magnetic force that tightly protected his body. Guided by the magnetic force, the sword beams shot out from the self-exploding beast warriors' bodies changed their direction immediately, thrusting towards the cultivators behind Zhang Yi in a messy manner. Not even in their wildest dreams did those cultivators of Qin army expect that Qin Qingshui and his company, who were being hunted like little lambs, would suddenly turn into hungry wolves. They did not even have the time to take out any defensive magical treasures, as the sword beams swept across them and sliced their bodies into pieces. In a panic, over 20 nascent soul cultivators broke out from their bodies and flew up into the sky, trying to flee towards the campsite of Qin army. Suddenly, a deep, muffled cry was heard coming from the great river behind Qin Qingshui and his company. Nascent souls of human cultivators, they are a great tonic. My children, don't let them go. The surface of the great river suddenly rocked and rocked, as Wanying Dragon King, clad in a golden armor and holding a pair of huge hammers in his hands, brought Lord Xianxing, Le Hai, Tan Shui, and Han Zhu, together with several thousand great demons whose bodies were shrouded in rolling water vapor, as they leaped out from the water valiantly. Waves of white water quickly converged in the center, surrounding Zhang Yi, the group of over 20 nascent soul cultivators, and tens of Qin army cultivators. Complacently, Wanying Dragon King waved the huge hammers in his hands, pointed at Zhang Yi and his company, laughed and said, "Be obedient and offer me your nascent souls, and I'll spare a thread of your soul for you to reincarnate. I have the virtue of cherishing every living thing, and I never kill anyone. We, the people of Dragon King Mansion in Longyuan River, have always been a family of doing good deeds and good deeds." The 5 big heads of the dark nether python hovering above Qin Qingshui's head slowly opened their mouths, from which came flying out 5 acquired spirit pearls that shone with a dazzling light. A series of violent coughs rang out, as Wu Qi leaped out from the big mouth of the dark nether python, bringing with him a stinking poisonous gas. Wu Qi spun around on the sandy beach, nearly falling to the ground. He pointed his finger at Qin Qingshui and cursed at the top of his voice, "Did this beast soul of yours grow up in a latrine pit? Why is your stomach so stinky?" He coughed a few times, then Wu Qi called back the black dragon spirit ring and spirit pearls of 5 elements. He raised his head and smiled at Zhang Yi, who had his eyes and mouth wide open, and said, "Old Mr. Zhang Yi, if you're willing, the position of Great Yan's imperial advisor is vacant. TSK, our emperor has acknowledged Lu Buwei as his master, and he is now king when Exin, left prime minister, and imperial advisor of Great Yan. If you're willing to submit to Great Yan, you'll be conferred the title of king, right prime minister, and also the imperial advisor of Great Yan. If you're willing to submit to Great Yan, you can choose whichever princess or princess of Great Yan you like." Zhang Yi's fingers trembled. Suddenly he transformed into a beam of dark light, bringing all his subordinates and their nascent souls, and was about to break through the white water and flee. Whinnying Dragon King let out a hideous laugh. Suddenly he teleported himself above Zhang Yi's head, wielded the pair of golden hammers and smashed them down forcefully. Chapter 253. Soon, Ying Zheng and his company arrived at the blessed land chosen by Wu Qi. The Blackwater River gently circled around the mountain, forming a lake at the foot of the mountain that measured several miles in circumference. The surface of the lake was as smooth as a mirror, and its color was as bright as crystal. The reflection of the green mountain in the water made it look like a huge painting of mountains and rivers painted with ink. Just looking at it would make one feel refreshed, as if they were drinking a fine wine. On top of the steep cliff of the Green Mountain, a large number of wisterias were hanging down, as if they had been carefully matched by a master craftsman. Every single wisteria and every single flower on it were placed in the perfect position, giving off a wonderful sense of beauty that could make one feel at peace and tranquility. The grassland next to the lake covered an area of approximately 30 acres of land. The grass was growing like a carpet, and every single blade of grass gave off an elegance that was as smooth and clear as jade. All the grasses were clean and tidy, and they served as a foil to the colorful wildflowers growing amidst the grasses, making them look exceptionally gorgeous. These flowers formed a complex, beautiful, and enormous pattern. At first glance, it seemed to be in a mess, but upon closer inspection, one would find that it was in a picturesque disorder. It gave off a comforting feeling, as if one was in one's own home. Separated by a rocky ridge were 17 colorful springs, each measuring about an acre in size and 10 feet in circumference. Hot water kept bursting out from the springs, while white steam that came with a strong smell of sulfur drifted across the surface of the lake along with the breeze. It seemed as if the white steam and the lake water had merged into one, entangling each other as they swayed and drifted across the surface of the lake. Yu Ji, Yu Tan, and over 30 serving ladies were lying lazily in the hot spring, quietly enjoying this rare leisure time. Dozens of jade plates and basins of different sizes were floating on the surface of the water, each containing a variety of mountain fruits and wine pots. The colorful fresh fruits served as a foil to these colorful hot springs, making them look even more picturesque. A strong aroma of wine was wafting out from the wine pots, mixed with the strong smell of sulfur, and actually brought with it a magical aphrodisiac aura. Ying Zheng and his company were looking down from a high vantage point, and from over 100 miles away, they could clearly see what was happening in the vicinity of the hot spring. The Qin generals who accompanied them lowered their heads and closed their eyes, not daring to take another look in that direction. All these girls were Ying Zheng's prey, and there was a high possibility that they would become the concubines in Deqin's harem in the future. As the ministers of Deqin, how could they dare to peep at the naked bodies of Ying Zheng's concubines? Only Ying Zheng and Yu Yao were peeping at the beautiful bodies of these girls without scruples. Looking down from the high vantage point, he could see everything clearly, and even the most private parts of Yu Ji and Yu Tan's hair could be seen clearly. Ying Zheng took a deep breath. Suddenly, his face turned slightly pale, and his body grew 3 inches taller. That woman with the profound Yin body is Li Yueyan? Li Yueyan who cultivates the heaven-breeding scripture of Goddess Su? As long as I seize her abstruse Yin body, I'll be able to seize the innate abstruse Yin Qi and become a heavenly immortal? Ying Zheng stared fixedly at Yu Tan, who was lying next to Yu Ji, with a small bunch of red wild grapes piled on her chest. He did not conceal the raging desire in his heart, and asked in a low voice with a hint of greed. "It's her. We have been together for over 2,000 years, how could Yu Yao mistake her for someone else?" Yu Yao's eyes shone with a cold gleam as she said coolly, "Yu Ji possesses remarkable abilities, and her combative strength is very strong. Li Yueyan is an expert in battle formations, and she is the best candidate for the vanguard. If your majesty can take them in, together with Yu Yao's ability to devise strategies, your majesty will have one more helping hand." Suddenly, several dozens of twisting dark shadows leaped out from the surrounding mountain ridges, quickly fusing into the dark cloud beneath Ying Zheng's feet. Standing next to Ying Zheng's chariot, Su Fu said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, there are no ambushes in the surrounding mountain ridges. But the guards around those girls are very strong. The several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu 10 miles away from them all possess the cultivation base of Jindan. And they are led by 18 peak-stage nascent soul generals. And among those mountain ghosts and deities, a few of them possess the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm." Su Fu took a deep breath, grinned coldly and said, "There is a group of mountain spirits and water ghosts of Great Chu hiding under the lake." Sure enough, Great Chu is a hybrid of barbarians, as they have even mastered the technique of controlling ghosts and deities that barbarians specialize in. There are a total of 30,000 mountain spirits and water ghosts in the lake, and they are led by 2 nascent divinity aquatic ghosts. If someone were to attack these girls rashly, perhaps he would be caught unprepared. Ing Zheng sneered disdainfully and said, "Although these mountain spirits and water ghosts have a very high cultivation base, the overall strength they can unleash is usually only half of their cultivation base." In those years, when Daqin was sweeping across all barbarian tribes, how many wild ghosts and mountain deities had he killed? Tens of thousands of mountain spirits and water ghosts, and hundreds of wild mountain deities. "Su Fu, do you think you can defeat them?" Su Fu cupped his fist, bowed slightly and said, Su Fu, am an expert in capturing ghosts and slaughtering deities." Baichi took a step forward and cried out in a low voice, "Let me deal with those several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu. Your Majesty, just focus on subduing the few concubines." Lowering his voice, Baichi said in a very respectful tone, "We wish your Majesty can absorb the innate dark Yin element, form the Dharma body of heaven immortal, attain the righteous fruit of heaven immortal, and lead Daqin to unify the universe in the future." Ing Zheng gave a few strange laughs, then nodded his head and said, "If I am lucky enough to succeed today, all of you will have contributed a lot. After I form the body of heaven immortal and possess the Dharma power of heaven immortal, I will definitely kill that whinnying demon dragon in Longyuan River, seize his dragon soul and blood essence, and complete the first stage of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. I wonder if I will get some other benefits after I become a heaven immortal and complete the first stage of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic?" With an unconcealable joy, the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent suddenly flew out from behind Ing Zheng's back, emanating an enormous pressure of flood dragons that swept across the surroundings. In an instant, the wind and clouds within 1,000 miles in circumference changed color. Water vapor rose from the surrounding mountain ridges, and raindrops the size of fists came pouring down from the sky. Ing Zheng gave a long and sonorous cry. With the imperial seal hovering above his head and the sword of Qin Emperor in his hand, Ing Zheng rode the chariot pulled by dragon horses. Accompanied by Yu Yao and accompanied by tens of thousands of thunderbolts, the chariot flew whistling all the way towards the hot spring. Ing Zheng cried out with a stern voice, "Wonderful! Wonderful! I never thought that I could meet such a beauty who can topple a nation in this wilderness. I am the Emperor of Daqin, and the few of you better obey me obediently. Li Yuan, instead of letting that old fool Huang Xie take advantage of you, why don't you offer all your energy essence to me? I'll consider it as a great merit for you." The chariot flew quickly above the hot spring. Without hesitation, Ing Zheng consumed a great amount of his energy essence, along with 100 years of his lifespan, and paid a great price, completely unleashing the enormous power of the imperial seal. A mighty aura of the human emperor, combined with the unique flood dragon force of the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, came crashing down, instantly pushing the 17 hot springs several hundred feet deep into the ground. Ing Zheng threw his head back and gave a wild laugh complacently into the sky. His eyes ran across the grassland next to the lake, and then the wisteria flowers on the cliff. For some unknown reason, the beautiful painting formed by these wildflowers, weeds, wisteria, and wisteria flowers made Ing Zheng's heart surge with an indescribable brutality. He wanted to destroy, he wanted to vent his anger, he wanted to destroy something. When the brutal energy fused with the evil flame in his lower abdomen, Ing Zheng gave a deep roar and tore his long robe. The imperial seal emanated a vast and boundless pressure, firmly suppressing Yu Ji and Yu Tan. Both of them raised their heads in shock, looking at Ing Zheng and crying out in alarm. A pure and magical aura sprayed out from Yu Ji's body, transforming into a jade-colored axe that one could see with naked eyes and thrust into the sky. However, right when the axe was thrust out, it was immediately shattered into pieces by the frightening pressure emanating from the imperial seal. Yu Yao let out a long and sonorous cry. Holding the jade flute in her hand, she sprung up into the sky, leaving behind countless afterimages as she lightly pointed her finger out. A melodious phoenix cry resounded through the void. Upon hearing it, both Yu Ji and Yu Tan's bodies turned stiff, and a misty look emerged in their eyes at the same time. But in this very moment, Ing Zheng had already leaped down and unleashed a heavy punch that contained the tremendous strength of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent, smashing viciously onto the fair and flawless bodies of the 2 girls. Several dozens of heavy punches landed, causing both Yu Ji and Chi-Chi to cough up blood and fall to the ground. Yu Yao, how dare you tell our weak point to an outsider? Yu Ji roared furiously. Yu Yao smiled faintly and said, "You can't blame me for this. We have been together for over 2,000 years, and I've learned all the weaknesses of the cultivation technique practiced by both of you. It's a pity that both of you have not attained mastery in your cultivation technique, or else, these weaknesses would not be considered as weak points. In the future, both of you will have to serve the same husband together, and you still have a long way to go." Yu Yao giggled, then waved the jade flute in her hand and easily knocked several dozens of serving ladies of Yu Ji and Yu Tan to the ground. "Then," she said softly, "when His Majesty and both of you are married, His Majesty and both of you will not be an outsider anymore." Boom! A loud boom rang out, as 30,000 mountain spirits and water ghosts soared up into the sky from the lake several thousand feet away. Howling furiously, they came charging towards the lake. However, countless primordial runes came pouring down from the sky, forming into a thick layer of restrictive runes above the lake. When those mountain spirits and water ghosts touched these runes that contained an enormous divine power, they were immediately scorched and ripped into pieces by the thunderbolts. Together with several tens of thousands of practitioners, Su Fu hovered above the lake, sneered and said, "You evil creatures, I've killed countless of you over the years, and yet you still dare to act presumptuously before me?" On the grassland next to the lake, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, who were sitting behind a curtain, drinking tea and enjoying the beautiful scenery, sprung up together and cried out in alarm, "Qin army! Somebody! Defend the enemies!" Countless sword beams came pouring down from above, as one lofty mountain after another came crashing down from above. Bringing a large group of cultivators, Li Si swooped down from the sky. He kept uttering one Dharma word after another, which transformed into a barrage of attacks that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth, forcing Qi Bin and Lu Mei to defend themselves. Li Si smiled faintly and said, "Are both of you the imperial concubines of the Emperor of Great Chu? He, when His Majesty is done with the 2 imperial concubines, he will naturally come over and caress both of you. Please do not be impatient. Dharma word, intimidate all ghosts and slay all evil." Li Si waved his hand casually. Countless golden beams shot out from the scroll before him, smashing onto those mountain spirits and deities who were patrolling around the curtain and making them howl miserably. The golden beams charred their spirit bodies, causing them to emit large clouds of white smoke. When the several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu stationed in a valley in the distance heard the commotion, they sprung up together and were about to rush to the rescue. But suddenly, the silhouette of a white tiger flashed across the sky. It was Bai Qi, leading several hundred generals and over 100,000 elite soldiers of Qin army, charging down from the sky. Battle cries towered into the sky, as the armies of both dynasties were engaged in a fierce battle. In the hot spring, Ing Zheng had long stripped himself naked. He grabbed Yu Tan and impatiently plunged into her body. "The throne of heaven immortal. Here I come." Ing Zheng threw his head back and laughed heartily. Behind him, 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent let out long and excited cries. 3,000 miles away, on top of a lofty mountain peak, Yan Dan and Chu Ping, together with countless military officers and ministers of both dynasties, were spying on what was happening next to the hot spring through a mystic technique. Jing Ku crossed his arms before his chest, shook his head and said with mixed emotions, bringing an army of several 100,000 soldiers to rape a woman, Ing Zheng has never done this before, and will never be able to do it again. It is truly a deed that will shake the heaven and earth, a glorious deed that will dazzle the world. From now on, the mighty name of Daqin will spread far and wide. While laughing coldly, Yu Ji, Yu Tan, Qi Bin, and Lu Mei walked out from behind Chu Ping. Their faces were unsightly as they stared at the images in the water mirror, stamping their feet angrily. Chapter 254. Wu Qi did not say a word. He just cooperated with Waning Dragon King and slowly weakened the magnetic force on Zhang Yi's body. Yen Dan had told them that if they bumped into any important ministers of Daqin like Zhang Yi, Li Si, or Su Fu, it would be best if they could capture them alive. No one would complain about having too many talented people. The two Earth Immortals standing next to Qi Nihu twitched their lips. Cautiously, they gave the several thousand aquatic demons in the surroundings a glance, then bowed their heads obediently. Waning Dragon King had a cultivation base that was close to that of a heaven immortal. But when he was wrapped by the golden flame, his scales were shattered, and large pieces of his skin and flesh were burned into ashes. Waning Dragon King kept howling in pain. Talismans made by heaven immortals. Talismans made especially for subduing demons. Boys, retreat. We cannot defend against the force of a heaven immortal. Lord Xianxing, the three great demons, and several thousand aquatic demons soared into the sky, leaping towards the cultivators brought here by Zhang Yi like a pack of hungry wolves. For demons, nascent souls and Jin Dan were great tonics that they could devour directly. While human cultivators had to consider the problem of impure energies, demons could not care less. They could even devour cultivators alive, let alone devouring nascent souls and Jin Dan. The gigantic beast soul of the dark nether python shot up into the sky. Controlling his beast soul, Qin Qingshui swallowed the nascent soul. A miserable howl rang out as the nascent soul was quickly digested by the poisonous aura in the dark nether python's body. Suddenly, a large sheet of green poisonous gas sprayed out from Qin Qingshui's body. His soul of dark nether python suddenly grew to 1,000 feet long, and its ferocious aura increased by at least 10 times. The soul of the dark nether python was so condensed that it looked like a real body, and vaguely, it looked no different from the original corporeal body of the dark nether python. Tens of Zhang Yi's clones condensed from magnetic power rushed to the white flood raised by those water-kind spirit creatures. All of a sudden, a dazzling black light burst out from those clones. Countless thin black thunderbolts roared out. The power of each clone was equivalent to a full force strike of an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Hundreds of water-kind spirit creatures vomited blood and stepped back. All weapons and armors worn by these water-kind spirit creatures, as long as they were made of metal, were taken away by the strong magnetic force, transformed into cold beams of light, and darted up. Zhang Yi held the arrow and howled. His body suddenly turned into a patch of black light, sweeping up the Yuanian cultivators and fleeing. Qi Nihu threw his head back and shouted, "Bastard! I lost an arm, I want one too. Even if I keep it with me and use it when I break through to the nascent soul realm in the future, I still want one. Wu Qi, you bastard, you really chopped off one of my hands. It's just acting. Do you have to be so ruthless?" The golden flame burst out from the bodies of Waning Dragon King and the other aquatic demons. In just a blink of an eye, their skins were ripped and their muscles were torn, and a burning smell was emitted from their bodies. The magnetic force around Zhang Yi's body was dimming, and he was about to be captured alive by Wu Qi and the others. All of a sudden, a 10 miles long golden talisman appeared in the air. A vast and mighty immortal energy burst out from the talisman, and a row of large characters, 8 elements demons subduing talisman created by the 9 spirits heaven, could be seen clearly on the surface of the golden talisman. Waning Dragon King was dazzled by the sudden attack of Zhang Yi, and it took him a while to locate Zhang Yi's true form. All of a sudden, the black dragon soul inside the black dragon spirit ring revealed its true form. It opened its mouth and swallowed the two nascent souls captured by Wu Qi. Then, it let out a satisfied dragon cry and hid back into the ring, slowly digesting the nascent souls and replenishing its energy. Wu Qi cursed angrily, then hastily chased after the few nascent souls who had fled to a distance of about 1 mile. Hastily, Wu Qi stretched his hand into the air and pulled over 2,000 demon cores into his palm. After that, he asked with a stern voice, "Who is the Almighty who dares to make things difficult for Great Yen?" Wu Qi took out a thick stack of high-level spirit talismans and smashed them towards Zhang Yi's face. The sky was filled with thunderbolts, fireballs, and golden ice blades. "You bastard! You say I'm a ruthless person? Do you think I'm a merciful person? Look at the sword on my belly. My spine was almost cut off by you guys. Damn it, Qin Nihu, don't let Lao Tzu bump into those two sinecures of Qin clan in Meng Mountains." The hammer was thrust out. Zhang Yi moved his body and dodged the attack, but a nascent soul cultivator who followed behind him had his body smashed by Waning Dragon King's hammer. The nascent soul cultivator let out a miserable howl as his fleshly body exploded into a mist of blood in an instant. His nascent soul flew out at top speed, leaving a trail of blood behind as it tried to hide into Zhang Yi's magnetic force. A cold laugh was heard coming from afar, followed by a jarring wind-breaking noise. An arrow was seen flying over from the sky, falling right into the hand of Zhang Yi, who was still in a panicked state. The voice sneered and said, "Great Yen has set up a dragon-slaying plan to kill the Emperor of Daqin, Ingzheng. This is the formation laid out by Great Yen and Great Chu. By following the formation, Ingzheng has a 30% chance of escaping. Hurry up and save him. Don't delay." A spirit talisman created by a heaven immortal? Lord Xiansheng and the other aquatic demons were cursing aloud as they plunged into the river with their bodies shrouded in raging flames. Although they had fled quickly, among the several thousand aquatic demons present, nearly half of them were burned into ashes. Over 2,000 demon cores, each the size of a water tank, were wheeling chaotically in the air and were about to be burned into ashes by the golden immortal energy. Wu Qi thrust out the sword of Greedy Wolf and left a deep wound on Zhang Yi's body. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said, "Old Mr. Giguzi has the most marvelous technique of yin and yang divination under the heaven. But over at Great Chu's side, His Majesty Chu Ping is leading 36,000 ghosts and deities to lay out the Shrouding Sky Formation, which has covered the entire heavenly secrets within 10 million miles of Meng Mountains, disrupting the circulation of stars and energies in the underground energy veins. Unless one has the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal, no one can find out anything." In the blink of an eye, the dark beam broke through the interception of the white water and shot several miles up into the sky. While Zhang Yi was about to exercise his divine ability and flee, Waning Dragon King had already teleported in front of Zhang Yi while laughing loudly. Two large hammers were smashing viciously towards Zhang Yi's escape beam. Waning Dragon King cried out sternly, "Little fellow, you still want to escape from my hands? No matter how strong your Tao, magic, and divine ability is, you have to stay here obediently." A strong black light flickered in the air. While foaming at the mouth, Waning Dragon King had exerted all his strength and forcefully smashed both golden hammers onto the protective magnetic force around Zhang. Buzzing noises of explosion kept ringing out. Zhang Yi had exercised the magnetic grand magic, connecting the surrounding underground energy veins and natural energies into one with the magnetic force. When Waning Dragon King's hammers smashed down, it was as if he was smashing the heaven and earth several hundred miles in circumference at the same time, causing the surrounding void to tremble violently. Zhang Yi roared furiously, "The Shrouding Sky Formation created by those barbarian ghosts and deities? If I can escape from here today, I'll definitely lead an army and invade Great Chu in the future, killing all those barbarian ghosts and deities. Zhang Yi, don't you dare run away. Leave the formation map behind." Wu Qi cried out sternly. Then, he too stepped onto a sword beam and chased after Zhang. Zhang Yi was so anxious that his face turned purple. He threw his head back and cried out at the top of his voice, "I, Zhang Yi, have been a wise man all my life, but I'm going to die here today." Oh, my master, your yin and yang divination technique is extremely magical, but why didn't you predict today's dangerous situation? Usually, even if there were any natural or man-made disasters happening in Qin Kingdom, Master would be able to sense it a few years in advance. But why didn't I see any sign today? Zhang Yi's cultivation base was just a tiny bit away from forming his nascent divinity, while Waning Dragon King was just one step away from transcending his thunder tribulation and becoming a heaven immortal. The gap between their cultivation base was too huge. Even though Zhang Yi had seized all the natural energies within several hundred miles in circumference, he still could not withstand the tremendous force of Waning Dragon King, which came like a thunderbolt, pressing down like Mount Tai. Wu Qi had a very close relationship with the aquatic demons from Longyuan River, and they dared not to bump into Wu Qi in the depth of Meng Mountains in the future. This young man was a cruel and merciless man. Perhaps he would really kill them, seize their nascent souls and concoct pills, or consume them directly. The nascent souls of Earth immortals were the purest essence of energy. As long as one's corporeal body could withstand the impact of the energy, possess a sufficient understanding of the heavenly Tao, and possess a sufficient cultivation base, consuming one nascent soul could almost allow an ordinary mortal to form his nascent soul. The magnetic escape beam was destroyed. Without hesitation, Wu Qi stretched out his hands and grabbed at those nascent souls that were flying away in all directions. Without a corporeal body, even a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator could not bring out the overall strength that a Jin Dan cultivator could exert. Wu Qi's great hand of web swept across the sky with shrill whistling noises. The acquired energies of 5 elements turned into 5 colored torrents, sucking one nascent soul after another into Wu Qi's palm. After that, he imprisoned them and threw them into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. When Wu Qi saw the benefits, he raised up a large sheet of water to cover his body, then sped up into the sky and grabbed towards the nascent soul of the Earth Immortal. The great hand of web thrust out whistling along with the acquired energies of 5 elements, forming an air vortex that measured 1,000 feet in diameter on Wu Qi's palm. A tremendous suction force coiled around the nascent soul, reducing its flying speed at an incredible rate. Wu Qi flew into a rage. He glared at Qin Qingshui and roared, "Among these nascent souls, I want at least 3 of them. Otherwise, I'll never let you go." The protective magnetic force around Zhang Yi's body was destroyed by Waning Dragon King with a violent force. The golden hammer brushed past Zhang Yi's body at a slanted angle, causing half of his shoulder to collapse and nearly shatter his body. Zhang Yi let out a miserable howl. Suddenly, his body swayed, and the magnetic force quickly gathered in his body. Layers of illusions soared into the sky. Using the magnetic force, Zhang Yi formed several hundred illusions of himself, shooting them out in all directions while cursing furiously. In just a blink of an eye, all of Zhang Yi's subordinates were killed. Only 7 Earth Immortals, the strongest among them, were still fighting with all their might. However, when faced with the joint attack from Lord Xianxing and the 3 great demons, as well as the countless water and yin thunders that blotted the sky, the 7 Earth Immortals were coughing out blood. It seemed that they would not be able to hold on for much longer. Quickly, together with the remaining cultivators around them, they chased after the arrows in a flustered and exasperated manner. The void talisman had vanished soundlessly, and the mountain ridge in the distance was completely empty, not even a shadow of a ghost could be seen. The formation of the aquatic demons was thrown into chaos. Zhang Yi waved his sleeve and rolled up his subordinates, as well as the nascent souls who had escaped after their bodies were destroyed. Then, he transformed into a dark beam and sped up into the sky. Zhang Yi had given up the thought of chasing after Wu Qi, retrieving the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, and seizing those innate and acquired treasures. Since Wu Qi and his company were a trap, could it be that Ying Zheng, who had gone to find Yu Ji and Li Yuan because of the words spoken by Wu Qi and Qin Qingshui, was also a trap? At the thought of the blow Da Qin would suffer if something were to happen to Ying Zheng, Zhang Yi was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. Qin Nihu and Qin Qingshui exchanged a glance. Suddenly, they jumped to their feet in exasperation and cried out, "Who leaked the military secret?" Capture that man and chop him into 1,000 pieces. Waning Dragon King kept smashing Zhang Yi with his heavy hammer as if he was swatting a fly. The attacks disintegrated Zhang Yi's escape beam, while Zhang Yi himself was coughing out a mouthful of blood. The difference between a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator and a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator was like the difference between a peak-stage Jindan cultivator and an ordinary infant. If not for Zhang Yi's magical magnetic grand magic, which allowed him to absorb the natural forces for his own use and replenish his energy, he would have been beaten to death by Waning Dragon King. Qin Qingshui burped contentedly, laughed out loud and said, "I'm not going to argue with you. My patriarch has used 3 inner cores of strange beasts to stimulate my beast soul, allowing me to break through to nascent soul realm. I can no longer generate beast soul for the next 3 years, or else, I'll most likely turn into a nether python. Hee hee. How many nascent souls can you grab today? Ugh, most of them will be yours." Chapter 255. Riding on a dark beam, Zhang Yi fled at top speed, while Wu Qi rode on the sword of Greedy Wolf, transforming into a dark shadow and following closely behind. As he was severely wounded by Waning Dragon King, Zhang Yi's speed was getting slower and slower, and Wu Qi was about to catch up with him. Amidst the dark beam, Zhang Yi gave a furious cry. Abruptly, the dark beam split into 7 tiny dark beams, escorting his 7 nascent soul subordinates as they shot forward. Suddenly, the magnetic force surrounding Zhang Yi retracted, and with a blink of his body, he came before Wu Qi and blocked his path. A dark gleam flickered in Zhang Yi's eyes as he stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "Wu Qi, do you really think you can defeat me?" Wu Qi retracted his sword beam, stared at Zhang Yi fearlessly, smiled and said, "How would I know if I don't try? I possess acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements, and I'm cultivating an acquired cultivation technique of 5 elements. However, apart from the Unity of Sword Energy's script of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, I don't have any other divine abilities or cultivation techniques. I'm sorry for my energy. Therefore, I just want to obtain the incantation of the magnetic grand magic from you, old mister." Zhang Yi stared at Wu Qi with astonishment. After a long while, he threw his head back, let out a long laugh and said, "So, the reason why you're chasing after me is to seize the divine abilities and mystic techniques from me? I thought you're trying to stop me from losing the blueprint of the dragon-slaying formation." Wu Qi shook his head and said, "I don't care whether the blueprint is lost or not. Great Yen and Great Chu have joined hands and laid out a massive ambush to kill Ing Zheng. If he still managed to escape, it would mean that Ing Zheng is not fated to die yet. I'm just a small potato, and I don't care about the affairs of the state." Giving Zhang Yi a strange smile, Wu Qi took a deep breath, smiled and said, "What I care about is my own cultivation base, my own divine abilities and dermic powers. On top of that, I have a supreme treasure transformed from innate earth element energy essence. If I can cultivate the magnetic grand magic, my future achievement will definitely be at least 100 times stronger than old mister." Zhang Yi's face twitched in anger. He cursed in a low voice, "Brat, you're being rude. Do you think I'm a dead dog that you can cook as you please? For the innate earth element energy essence to fall into your hands is like casting pearls before swine. Damn it. All these years Daqin, have collected over 30 types of innate spirit objects, and most of them are of the element of gold and wood. This is the first time I've seen this innate earth element energy essence." Staring hard at Wu Qi, Zhang Yi rolled up his sleeves with some malice. While rolling up his sleeves, he sneered and said, Fine. I'll be shameless and take away your innate earth element energy essence today. And those 5 acquired spiritual pearls? I can take them back and bestow them to my descendants. They are also precious treasures. Although our Daqin is rich and populous, if we split it evenly, each noble clan won't even get a single acquired spirit pearl. Countless magnetic forces shot out, turning into black flying swords that shot toward Wu Qi. Zhang Yi roared with laughter and said, "And the black dragon spirit ring. This is the imperial decree given to me by His Majesty. If you had retreated into the water with that old dragon, I would not be able to do anything to you. But little did I expect that you would come to me on your own accord. Now, I can only bully a junior like you." The flying swords formed from magnetic force were extremely sharp and heavy, and they flew at an incredible speed as well. These magnetic flying swords had the same effect as the golden dragon scales on Wu Qi's earth element dragon scale shield, but they were different methods that led to the same result. In just a blink of an eye, the flying swords, which were formed from several tens of thousands of magnetic forces, had arrived next to Wu Qi, thrusting towards him from top to bottom, as if they were going to grind him into minced meat on the spot. Wu Qi casually raised his left hand and activated the earth element dragon scale shield. A clump of dense yellow mist wrapped around his body, while several tens of thousands of golden beams in the shape of dragon scales wheeled rapidly around him, clashing and colliding with the countless palm-sized magnetic flying swords. Deep, muffled booms of explosions kept ringing out. As the magnetic flying swords did not have real bodies, they shattered into pieces after colliding with the golden dragon scales. The glow of the golden dragon scales dimmed a little, but under the control of Wu Qi's will, it quickly flew back into the earth element dragon scale shield, quickly replenishing its innate earth element energy essence, and shot out again with a dazzling gleam. Sensing the tremendous impact coming from the magnetic flying swords, as well as the aura of sharpness that was a few times sharper than the golden dragon scales, Wu Qi nodded his head and praised, "Wonderful! If I can cultivate the magnetic grand magic and use it to drive the earth element dragon scale shield, its power will be at least 100 times stronger. Old Mr. Zhang Yi, please give in to me." Laughing loudly, Wu Qi waved his hand. A ring of dense yellow light rushed out from the shield, quickly devouring all the magnetic flying swords that came piercing at him from all directions. The innate earth element energy essence was the source of all the earth element energies under the heaven. The magnetic force was also a type of earth element energy. By controlling the innate earth element energy essence and devouring the magnetic flying swords, Wu Qi converted the magnetic force into nutrients for the earth element dragon scale shield, just like how humans ate and drank. The rolling yellow mist around him grew denser and denser, while the magnetic force released by him kept weakening. Zhang Yi stared at Wu Qi with anger and shock. Suddenly he sneered and said, "Fine, fine. Since you want to seize my magnetic grand magic, I'm going to seize all your treasures as well. Today, this old man will go all out and compete with you, a junior, for a while. You have the innate earth element energy essence to protect you. Although you only have the cultivation base of early-stage Jin Dan realm, don't blame me for bullying you." Then he waved both hands, causing the natural energies in the underground energy veins and all the natural energies within 1,000 miles to ripple and gather towards him. It was as if his body had turned into a huge black hole, quickly devouring all kinds of natural energies. A black light ball about 1 mile in diameter and formed by the magnetic force, enveloped Zhang Yi and Wu Qi, then quickly drilled into the ground. Like a drop of water fusing into the ocean, the magnetic force quickly fused into the ground. Before long, it had traveled several thousand miles away along with the underground energy veins. Wu Qi hovered quietly in the black ball of light, looking at Zhang Yi with a smile on his face and letting Zhang Yi use his divine ability to take him away. Zhang Yi fished out a medicine bottle and swallowed a few healing spirit pills. While circulating his energy and regulating his breath, he smiled faintly at Wu Qi and said, "In order to lure His Majesty into your trap, you've really made up your mind. Those subordinates you killed in the battle are all men of sacrifice, aren't they? It's fine if you lost some men of sacrifice, but in order to make us believe that you're really fighting among yourselves, you've actually wounded yourselves. You've really made up your mind." Wu Qi nodded with a smile and said, "If I can't be ruthless to myself, how can I deceive you?" Touching the wound on his belly that was cut by the sword beam, Wu Qi sighed and said, "If not for the fact that the Emperor of Great Chu, Chu Ping, had given me the bamboo paste, a spirit medicine that can heal all wounds in an instant, Wu Qi would never agree to their damned plan of luring the enemy. My spine was nearly broken by the flying sword. It's very painful, very painful." Smiling, Zhang Yi looked at Wu Qi, nodded and said, "Apart from this paste, are there any other benefits?" Wu Qi nodded and said, Of course there are. His Majesty has promised me that if I can successfully lure Yingzheng into the ambush, he will confer me the title of Duke of Purple Jade Seal, the highest rank among all the dukes of Great Yen. Qin Qingshui and all the others can also be conferred the title of Marquis. After all, this is a mission with the risk of being beheaded. Breathing out a deep sigh, Wu Qi said, "Men die for wealth, and birds die for food." Apart from the reward from His Majesty Chu Ping has also promised me that as long as we can lure Yingzheng into the ambush, regardless of the outcome, he will reward me, Qin Nihu, and Qin Qingshui with a precious treasure. Rubbing his palms happily, Wu Qi smiled and said, "The precious treasure mentioned by the Emperor of Great Chu should not be too shabby, right?" Zhang Yi's expression flickered. He pointed his finger out, and the black ball of light abruptly emerged from the ground, bringing both men with it. It was a swamp amidst a group of mountains about 100 miles in circumference. The sky was filled with miasma, and stinking poisonous gases were drifting in all directions. Countless venomous bugs were swimming in the swamp, and there were some withered trees and grasses growing sparsely in the swamp. They looked strangely shaped, and obviously, they were not some kind creatures. Zhang Yi glanced around and smiled satisfyingly. He turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Duke of Purple Jade Seal, a first-grade Duke of Great Yen? And the precious treasure promised by Chu Ping? But have you ever thought that if you were to be captured alive by me, or even killed by me, how would you be able to enjoy that illustrious title and precious treasure? You've come to pursue this old man to seize this old man's magnetic grand magic." He raised his hand, and a black-yellow seal shot up into the sky from the top of Zhang Yi's head. Immediately, the surrounding mountains and rivers trembled violently. Zhang Yi pointed at the seal and said with a smile, "This is the Seal of Thousand Mountains. It can suppress underground energy veins, and draw the forces of mountains and rivers within 10,000 miles for my use." With a wave of his hand, a dazzling golden bell in the shape of a bell appeared in Zhang Yi's hand. He looked at Wu Qi, smiled and said, "The name of this treasure is the Mountain-Moving Bell. It can control the earth and mountains and rivers to move according to my will. If my cultivation base reaches the realm of heaven immortal, I can even turn the mountains and rivers into divine beings, controlling them to fight against the enemies." Staring at Wu Qi, Zhang Yi let out a long laugh and said, Wu Qi, even though you are protected by the innate earth element energy essence, your cultivation base is far weaker than mine. On top of that, I have an extraordinary ancient treasure with me. What can you do to me?" Zhang Yi snorted deeply, then snapped, "Hand over all your treasures and submit to me, Da Qin, and I can still guarantee you a bright future. Da Qin is destined to sweep across the world and unify the world. You have no future in Great Yen." Wu Qi chuckled and waved his left hand. A large sheet of white light burst out from the spirit-breeding ring, from which came 100 long-bow men with silvery hair, bodies as fair as jade, and eyes that flickered with a silvery gleam that looked like a raging flame. They roared thunderously and dashed out from the white light. When Wu Qi bought them, these long-bow men were only 100 feet tall. But, after consuming the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup and forming the Jin Dan, in just a few months, these long-bow men had grown to a height of 1,000 feet. Especially the first Long Yuan who formed the Jin Dan, his height had reached 1,500 feet. These huge long-bow men only had a large piece of hide wrapped around their crotch area, exposing the rest of their bodies. There were complicated golden runic patterns on their faces, extending all the way down to their arms. On their necks, the golden runes seemed to be extending toward their bodies. A few of them had branched out from the main runes, vaguely enveloping half of their bodies. Relying on their innately strong fleshly bodies, the amount of energy stored in their bodies was thousands of times greater than that of ordinary human cultivators, and their innately strong souls, long-bow men could always fight with human cultivators who were one realm higher. Long-bow men of Jindan realm could fight with human cultivators of nascent soul realm. Long-bow men of nascent soul realm could fight with human cultivators of nascent divinity realm. And long-bow men who had formed their nascent divinity realm could fight with lower-grade heaven immortals. This was a race with incredible innate talent. Right when the 100 longbow men who formed the Jin Dan rushed out, Zhang Yi gave a strange cry with fear, spun and fled without saying a word. But, no matter how fast Zhang Yi fled, these huge longbow men were even faster. As soon as they jumped out of the white light, they instantly teleported into the air, where they set up a mighty and mysterious grand formation, the Heavenly 100 Spirit Warring Formation. Teleportation. Right after these longbow men formed the Jin Dan, they had mastered the divine ability of teleportation, which only nascent divinity cultivators could use. At this moment, their innate divine ability and innate strength were completely revealed. Zhang Yi, who had transformed into a dark beam and fled, did not expect that these giants could actually teleport when they were still in the Jin Dan realm. Therefore, he decided to send himself to the Heavenly 100 Spirit Warring Formation. Wu Qi gave 3 loud laughs, then stuck out his chest and cried out, "Capture them alive. Just don't kill them." A thunderclap echoed out, and the formation was immediately activated. Countless thunderbolts and flames that looked like flood dragons burst out from the huge bodies of these longbow men. Behind these giants, strange signs of Jin Dan emerged one after another. All of them looked exactly like these longbow men, except that they were about 10,000 feet tall. Chapter 256. 100 longbow men, whose overall strength was comparable to Earth immortals of nascent soul realm, were using the secret ancient formation of Scroll of Stealing, the Heavenly 100 Spirit Warring Formation. Caught unprepared, Zhang Yi was slapped down by Long Yuan. Like a bug being swatted by a fly, he coughed up blood and fell into the formation. White clouds rose from the ground in all directions, enveloping an area of 100 miles in circumference. Tiny thunderbolts darted and darted amidst the clouds like countless shooting stars. They were soundless, yet brought with them a very strong aura of destruction. Within the formation, the enormous energies of 100 longbow men, which were a few times stronger than those of ordinary Earth immortals of nascent soul realm, were linked together. Strengthened by the formation, their energy and spirit had fused into one, and their divine will had left behind a peculiar spiritual body. When the souls of 100 longbow men fused into one, their divine will immediately surpassed that of ordinary nascent divinity cultivators. Like 100 small rivers converging together, the divine will of longbow men turned into a great river in just a blink of an eye. Accompanied by a mighty whistling sound, it pressed down toward Zhang Yi on the spiritual level. Zhang Yi was an intelligent man, and his divine will had reached the realm of early-stage nascent divinity warrior. However, his cultivation of energy had yet to break through the realm of nascent divinity. In essence, the quality of Zhang Yi's soul was 100 times stronger than the souls of longbow men. However, the total amount of divine will of longbow men was at least 100,000 times greater than that of Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's divine will was as pure and condensed as a small hill, but when all 100 longbow men gathered their divine will together, it was like a great river that was surging and flooding. Zhang Yi's body was greatly shaken after he was slapped into the formation by Long Yuan. Suddenly, his divine will was struck by the combined divine will of longbow men, causing his divine will to tremble violently. Dripping water penetrates a stone. Under the scouring of the mighty river, even a mountain would be washed into nothingness by the endless stream of water. Haha! The 10,000 feet tall Jin Dan giants behind the backs of the longbow men burst out laughing. 100 giants, each of them standing 10,000 feet tall, strode toward the formation. With a loud bang, the bodies of the 100 giants collided together, condensing into a giant figure that was 10,000 feet tall, with a sturdy body that looked like a living person. The giant stood on a giant pincer and held 2 black dragons in its hands. Dark clouds covered its head, and countless lightning bolts shot down from the dark clouds, flowing down along the giant's smooth, crystal-like skin. The lightning was like a stream of water, and the powerful lightning was compressed into a ripple-like energy flow. Bolts of lightning danced around the giant's body, finally transforming into a layer of energy that was close to an armor. The giant threw his head back and let out a long and sonorous laugh. His laughter shook the heaven and earth, and a tremendous spiritual pressure was emanating from him, nearly catching up to Wanying Dragon King. Wow! Even Wu Qi, the culprit, stared at the unbelievably magnificent giant in astonishment. The Heavenly 100-Spirit Warring Formation was originally set up by human cultivators. It could fuse all the essence, energy, and spirit of those who set up the formation into one, allowing them to unleash more than 100 times their battle prowess. But Wu Qi had never expected that when the people who set up the formation were all longbow men, it would produce such a miraculous and unbelievable change. When the Jin Dan giants of 100 longbow men gathered together, they actually summoned a thread of the soul essence of an ancient longbow man in their bloodline, fusing the soul into the body and giving birth to the true projection of an ancient longbow man. Led by Long Yuan, the 100 longbow men began to recite the ancient divine mantra that was passed down in the longbow kingdom, dancing and performing the great witch dance. The witch dance was inherited from the prehistoric era, a battle dance performed by the ancestors of the longbow men when they fought against all living beings in the world and fought for resources to survive. As the battle dance began, the spirit, energy, and fleshly bodies of the longbow men began to boil, while all their essence, energy, and spirit were injected into the huge projection of the true projection above their heads without reservation. Oh my God, if I can gather 10,000 longbow men. I'm afraid this Heavenly 100-Spirit Warring Formation will be able to slaughter heaven immortals. Wu Qi's eyes were wide open. He swore that no matter what happened, no matter what the consequences were, he would hold a great power in his hands. After that, he would deploy an army that could overturn the entire country, cross the Eastern Ocean, and launch an attack on the Longbow Kingdom, then abduct 10,000 longbow men. Purple Leaf City seems to be located on the shore of the Eastern Ocean. I have to make Purple Leaf City grow stronger as soon as possible. Grow stronger. Grow stronger. I have to use all the resources and authority in my hands to help Yi Zifeng strengthen Purple Leaf City. Instead of letting an outsider take advantage of my fellow disciples, I might as well let him take advantage of it. Build a kingdom. I have to make Purple Leaf City a kingdom as soon as possible. Use all kinds of tricks. I have to make him build a kingdom as soon as possible. A strong green gleam shone from Wu Qi's eyes. He wished he could rush into the Longbow Kingdom right now and devour all of them. According to the legend, there were a few extremely old patriarchs in the Longbow Kingdom who had the cultivation base of peak-stage nascent divinity realm and were quietly guarding the Longbow Kingdom. Wu Qi really wished he could rush into the Longbow Kingdom right now and abduct as many longbow men as he could. Strategic resources, these were real strategic resources. While Wu Qi was still cursing, Zhang Yi had already activated the Thousand Mountains seal in a flustered and exasperated manner. The surrounding natural energies kept being injected into the seal, producing a large number of shadowy mountains that smashed heavily into the sky. The mountains were thrown upside down into the sky, and the heavy pressure crushed all the surrounding mountains. Hovering in the sky, the projection of the ancient ancestor of Longbow Kingdom just cast a cold and merciless glance down. With just a glance, the shadowy mountains created by Zhang Yi's Thousand Mountain seal were shattered into pieces, and countless natural energies were torn into pieces by an invisible and tremendous force, fusing into the body of the projection of the ancient ancestor, transforming into fifth earth vibrating thunders and shooting out from the body of the projection. Suddenly, the black dragon with both hands clenched opened its mouth and shot out 2 thunderbolts, each about 10 feet in diameter, which smashed viciously onto Zhang Yi's body. Zhang Yi roared furiously. Suddenly, the shadows of 3 golden crows burst out from his black robe. Each of them stood 100 feet tall and breathed raging flames from their mouths, bringing with them a sky full of stars. They wheeled and danced around Zhang Yi, emanating an immeasurable glow and blocking the 2 thunderbolts. Although the black robe worn by Zhang Yi looked inconspicuous, it was actually a defensive garment of middle-grade magical treasure level. With his cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm, it was more than enough to withstand the attack of an early-stage nascent divinity cultivator. But, The power of the projection of the ancient ancestor was simply too great. The two thunderbolts smashed viciously onto the starlight of the golden crows, and in just 1/10 of a second, they completely shattered the starlight. The thunderbolts smashed onto Zhang Yi's body and knocked him down into the dust, sinking tens of miles deep into the ground. Then, the thunderbolts exploded, causing countless bubbles to burst out from the ground within a circumference of 100 miles. The huge bubbles expanded to several hundred feet in circumference, then exploded quickly. The lava bubbles spurted out countless amounts of lava, black gas, and poisonous flames, as well as bolts of lightning that shot in all directions. Zhang Yi's black robe was ripped to shreds by the explosion, revealing a light purple magical outfit, which was covered with countless life-saving runes and was glinting with a dazzling light. Blood sprayed out from all 7 apertures of his, and his body was stiff and unable to move. He was pushed several miles high up into the air by a pillar of lava, and then slammed back onto the ground by Long Yuan with a fierce slap. The ground shook violently, as Long Yuan's slap had sunk several hundred feet deep into the ground. Zhang Yi was stuck flat on the flat ground, his body shivering slightly, unable to move anymore. However, Long Yuan and the others were not willing to let him go. It seemed that this group of longbow men, who were full of energy and seemed to have vented all the resentment of being trapped in the spirit breeding ring for a long period of time on Zhang Yi. Together, they leaped up and gave Zhang Yi a round of violent stomps with their huge feet. Thud, 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 thud. A series of loud noises rang out. Several miles below the ground where Zhang Yi was standing, a huge pit was formed. Zhang Yi's clothes were disheveled, and his face was scorched black. He lay shivering at the bottom of the pit, howling at the top of his lungs, "Wu Qi, stop it! If you keep beating me, I'm going to die. Once I'm dead, Su Qin will never forgive you, my master will never let you go, and all of us, the disciples of Ghost Valley, will come and settle the score with you." Coughing lightly, Wu Qi ordered Long Yuan and the others to stop beating Zhang. Holding the sword of Greedy Wolf in his hand, he came next to Zhang Yi with swaying steps, then slowly scraped Zhang Yi's face with the edge of the sword, cutting off a large amount of beard from his face. "Disciples of Ghost Valley?" asked Wu Qi as he squatted next to Zhang Yi, reaching out his hand and removing a storage ring from Zhang Yi's finger. "Disciples of Ghost Valley." With a serious expression, Zhang Yi looked at Wu Qi and said with a serious face, "The disciples of Ghost Valley can serve their own masters, and they can plot and kill each other. This is an internal affair of Ghost Valley. If an outsider kills any disciple of Ghost Valley, the entire Ghost Valley will definitely seek revenge with all their strength." Shaking his head, Wu Qi quickly searched Zhang Yi's body, then removed a small jade slip hanging on Zhang Yi's neck, a jade slip secretly hidden under his belt, and a string of jade beads tied around his thigh. Recorded in the jade slip was the entire cultivation technique of the acquired magnetic grand magic that Zhang Yi was cultivating. Recorded on the jade slip was a cultivation technique of the acquired magnetic zenith sword. Inside the 18 jade beads were 18 escape arts and magical arts of earth element, as well as a few methods to refine earth element magical treasures. When all these things were put together, they formed a complete set of the acquired magnetic grand magic. From the cultivation technique, to the methods to attack and defend against enemies, to the methods to refine suitable magical treasures, this set of cultivation technique was the most complete set that Wu Qi had ever seen since he came to this world. Even a few chapters of the Supreme White Sun Shocking Dragon incantation that Jing Ku was cultivating were still missing. Without hesitation, Wu Qi engraved all the cultivation techniques into his spiritual ocean, then threw all the jade slips, and jade beads back to Zhang. Under the hopeful gaze of Zhang Yi, Wu Qi strung the storage ring with the natural worm silk and hung it around his neck without the slightest hesitation. Over 30 storage rings were hung around Wu Qi's neck like a necklace, glittering brightly and producing tinkling noises when they collided with each other. It was truly a magnificent sight. Despairingly, Zhang Yi stared at the ring, which had a pale purple hue, was of excellent quality, and had a storage space of 1 square mile. He said furiously, "It contains all the wealth that I've accumulated over 2,000 years. Are you going to take it away just like that? The extremely sharp tip of the sword of Greedy Wolf casually drew a line across Zhang Yi's face, leaving a bloody mark on his face. Zhang Yi immediately nodded his head and said with a smile, "You are indeed a promising young man. These are just some worldly possessions, and they are not that important. As the saying goes, a treasured sword should be given to a valiant warrior. My young friend Wu Qi, you are the first talented young man that I've met in all these years. I'm sure you will have a bright and limitless future. I'm willing to give up these trivial wealth and form a good relationship with you, my young friend. It will be better in the future." Wu Qi interrupted Zhang Yi. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile on his face, "I'm not afraid of the revenge from Ghost Valley, but I'm afraid of the soul-devouring blood curse in your body. All the civil and military officials of Daqin are too vicious. How could they hide something like this in their bodies? If my cultivation base was strong enough today, I would definitely kill you with a single sword strike. Too bad, this blood curse is too vicious." Zhang Yi turned to look at Wu Qi in shock, then cried out with a stern voice, "How could you discover the deadly blood curse that Master and Su Fu had planted in my body?" Wu Qi threw his head back and let out 3 loud laughs. With a thought in his mind, he circulated the earth element energies in his body according to the magical technique of magnetic force found in the magnetic grand magic for a minor cycle. After that, he casually stretched his hand out and grabbed into the air. Immediately, a mountain rock weighing several tens of thousands of kilograms was uprooted by an invisible force along with a loud rumble. Zhang Yi's face fell instantly. He cried out in a low voice, "The acquired magnetic force, how could you learn it so quickly?" Wu Qi shook his head and gave Zhang Yi a deep look, then spun, transformed into a beam of dark light and sped away. Obviously, the dark beam was the sword escape technique found in the acquired magnetic sword. Zhang Yi lay on the ground in a daze, staring at Wu Qi and the longbow men who followed closely behind him. For a long while, he could not make a sound. After a long while, he finally crawled up from the ground, stomped his feet, threw his head back and cursed, "You heartless and shameless thief! That's my wealth of over 2,000 years. Chapter 257. Riding on the acquired magnetic sword beam and flying forward, Wu Qi was secretly comparing the advantages and disadvantages of this sword escape art with the other escape arts he had mastered. Although the innate escape art of 5 elements secretly taught in Scroll of Stealing was incredibly fast and marvelous, it could easily attract the attention of others, and could not be exposed to the public. The sword control art of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect only focused on the power and lethality of the sword beam, but did not pay much attention to the speed. Therefore, the sword escape art of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect was a little embarrassing. Therefore, Wu Qi would rather step on a cloud and drift around leisurely than let the people from other sects in Great Yan Dynasty laugh at him. However, the acquired magnetic extreme light sword that he had plundered from Zhang Yi's hands contained the sword escape art. His speed was frighteningly fast. It wrapped the sword beam transformed from the sword of Greedy Wolf with magnetic force, drawing the natural magnetic force to accelerate the sword beam. The front was pulled by the magnetic force, and the back was pushed by the magnetic force. The longer the distance Wu Qi flew, the faster the sword beam traveled. When he was flying on the sword just now, the speed was only 1.5 times faster than the speed of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect's sword. But when he had flown over 2,000 miles, the speed had increased to 3 times faster than the speed of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect's sword. Like a wisp of dark shadow, the dark beam streaked across the sky soundlessly. As the surrounding air was repelled by the magnetic force, Wu Qi was like a fish swimming in the water, not making any noise. As expected of Zhang Yi's special skill, this magnetic extreme light sword escape is too amazing for words. He carefully calculated the entire set of magnetic sword beam in his mind. If this sword technique was used together with the magnetic force, its power would be indescribable. Furthermore, it was the best way to restrain flying swords and magical treasures made from metals. As long as the flying swords and magical treasures were made from metals, once they touched the acquired magnetic sword beam, they would be like sending themselves to the front door, and would be easily crushed by the sword beam. In the world of cultivators, how many flying swords and magical treasures were not made from metals? Through calculation and comparison, Wu Qi was shocked to find that when he cultivated this sword technique to perfection, the speed of his sword light would be more than 100 times faster than when he performed the innate 5 elements escape art. This was a sword escape technique that relied purely on speed to win. If he could transform the acquired magnetic aurora sword into an innate magnetic aurora sword by absorbing the earth element energy essence, his flying speed would definitely reach an astonishing level. Wonderful! Wu Qi let out a strange laugh, then hurriedly sent all the longbow men back into the spirit-breeding ring. He retracted his sword beam, exercised the escape art of earth, and snuck stealthily and carefully toward the territory controlled by Great Yan's army. This place was still under the control of the Qin army. If they were to fly in the air while riding the sword light, once they were targeted by the experts of the Qin army, it would be a huge problem. Although they were relying on the heavenly 100-spirit warring formation deployed by the longbow men, it had consumed too much of their energy. When they defeated Zhang Yi, they had depleted all the energies of Long Yuan and his men. With the current cultivation base of Long Yuan and his men, this formation could only be used as their last trump card, and could not be used as a daily method to fight the enemy. After traveling for over 1,000 miles, avoiding several hundred squads of Qin scouts, Wu Qi suddenly sensed a strange aura coming from a mountain peak in the south. The aura was ancient, obscure, and profound, and when it rippled, it vaguely matched with the Tao of heaven and earth. If not because a thread of Wu Qi's nascent divinity was nourished by the innate 5 elements energy, and had a level that was infinitely compatible with the Tao of heaven and earth, he would never be able to discover this thread of aura. An extraordinary treasure has been born? Or, someone is driving a rare and extraordinary treasure? Immediately, Wu Qi felt an itch in his heart. He hesitated for a brief moment, but eventually, his desire for the extraordinary treasure had surpassed the caution for his own safety. He changed the acquired earth escape art to the innate earth escape art, transforming his body into a faintly discernible yellow beam that connected with the entire earth. Then, he carefully flew toward the direction where the aura came from. This was the difference between the acquired earth escape art and the innate earth escape art. The acquired earth escape art allowed one to dive into the earth and move forward like a fish swimming in the water, while the innate earth escape art allowed one to transform into the earth and fly forward along with the pulsation of the earth. No matter it was the ability to conceal oneself or the speed of the escape art, the innate escape art was thousands of times better than the acquired escape art. This was the difference between the innate and the acquired. Unless someone had also cultivated an innate technique and was lucky enough to have a thread of innate energy with him, no one would be able to discover Wu Qi's trace. While traveling, Wu Qi carefully unleashed a thread of divine flame of order, burning away the nascent divinity seal on Zhang Yi's storage ring. Then he absorbed all the soul particles that drifted away in the air, turning them into another small tonic for his soul. After that, he sent his divine will into the storage ring, and Wu Qi couldn't help but cry out in shock. Meanwhile, over 1,000 miles away, Zhang Yi, who had just climbed up from the huge pit in a wobbly manner, looked at the 1,000-mountain seal and mountain-moving spike in his hands and felt like weeping but had no tears. Suddenly had blood burst out from his 7 apertures. He let out a miserable howl, threw his head back and bellowed furiously, "Wu Qi, you little thief! You, with the cultivation base of Jin Dan, how could you possibly break my nascent divinity seal? You little bastard, what evil technique did you use to break my restrictive spell? What a pity for my over 2,000 years of treasures." In the storage ring, dozens of bookshelves filled with books and manuals were the first to be taken out. Wu Qi scanned through these books with his divine will. To his surprise, he found that all of them were the secret techniques and cultivation techniques practiced by many civil and military officials of the Qin dynasty. In all the books, there were comments written by Gigazi, Su Fu, Li Si, Zhang Yi, and many others. Obviously, these civil and military officials of the Qin dynasty were systematically analyzing and optimizing these books. Most probably, these books in Zhang Yi's storage ring were his daily homework. However, since his storage ring was taken away by Wu Qi, these books, which contain the painstaking efforts of many civil and military officials of the Qin dynasty, had become Wu Qi's spoils of war. Looking at these books, Wu Qi could not help but let out a big smile. Among them, some of the divine abilities and mystic techniques related to 5 elements were something he could cultivate himself. Apart from that, he could also present all these books to Yen Dan, which would be a great credit to him. With these books, about half of the divine abilities and mystic techniques cultivated by the civil and military officials of the Qin dynasty were exposed. It was obvious that Bai Qi and the others would not take out the most exquisite part of their cultivation method for others to study. It was already very selfless of them to take out about half of the mnemonic chant to improve and optimize it. Just this half of it was a huge contribution. Wu Qi's insides were trembling. Zhang Yi was really too generous. Or rather, he had never worried that he would be captured alive? Even a storage ring could be taken away by someone? Wu Qi shook his head. As expected, people could not be too confident in themselves. Too much confidence was pride, and they would suffer greatly. Wu Qi's spiritual sense probed one of the books, wanting to see what secrets this secret method labeled Blackwater Anaconda Truth had. In the end, countless tiny runes shot out from the book, burning towards Wu Qi's divine sense like a clump of flame. Wu Qi quickly retracted his divine sense, not daring to peek at these books again. He was indeed very cautious. These books were attached with countless restrictive runes, and if not opened with a specific method, these books would self-destruct. Shaking his head, Wu Qi murmured in a low voice, "Since I've given these books to Yen Dan, I can't deny the credit. As for whether I can break these books or not, that's none of my business. It all depends on whether those imperial advisors and sinecures of Great Yen Dynasty have the ability to do so. I suppose these restrictive runes are the work of Giguzi. Old Mr. Modi, old Mr. Sun Kuang, you can't lose to him." Apart from these books, there were also a great amount of spirit pills, demon cores, and blood essences of demon beasts, as well as all kinds of strange and rare treasures. Although the quality of these treasures was 1 grade lower than those found in Black Dragon Spirit Ring, and the quantity was much lesser, it could still be considered as an astronomical amount of wealth. After all, Zhang Yi had collected over 2,000 years. Even if he had spent most of them on his own clan members, there would still be a lot left. What surprised Wu Qi even more was that there was a fully formed acquired pearl of flame element in the ring, and 2 clumps of acquired energies that were not fully formed yet, but were extremely condensed, which could be used to craft upper-grade magical treasures, or even spirit items. The 2 balls of acquired spiritual energy were of the water and wood attributes respectively. Moreover, they were the mutated varieties of acquired spiritual energy of the 5 elements. The water attribute spiritual energy was a ball of frigid mysterious ice chi, while the wood attribute spiritual energy was a ball of dazzling lightning chi. Marvelous! Wu Qi chuckled again. How could he not be delighted when he could reap such a great harvest after robbing Zhang Yi? Perhaps he should consider using the Heavenly 100-Spirit Warring Formation to rob all those important ministers of the Qin dynasty when they were alone. Even though they were all cursed by Giguzi and Su Fu, which prevented him from killing them, it was still a rare windfall. While he was pondering about his next target, Wu Qi had stealthily approached the lofty mountain. Cautiously, he poked his head out from between a cliff that was densely covered with wisteria. Right in front of him was the peak of the lone mountain, where he saw a group of 108 young boys and girls, holding long black banners in their hands, which were painted with a map of the stars in the universe. They stood there with a solemn expression on their faces. Before Giguzi was a strange-shaped turtle shell, measuring several dozens of feet in circumference. He was holding an ancient, colorful writing brush made from white bones, and was quickly waving and brushing on the turtle shell, drawing one mysterious rune after another. On the surface of the turtle shell, all kinds of mountains, rivers, and figures were flickering and changing, yet all of them were blurry, as if they were separated by a layer of frosted glass. Next to Giguzi, Yingxing was standing with a pale face, looking anxiously at Giguzi, who was casting the turtle shell. All of a sudden, Giguzi cried out with a stern voice, "Ghosts and deities of the heaven and earth, listen to my command. Gather the heavenly stars, and gather the earthly evils. Gather the spirit-connecting energies from all directions." Then he waved his hand and waved his hand. Immediately, a chilly wind rose from the mountain ridge. Suddenly, a vast and mighty spirit light burst out from the top of Giguzi's head, within which was a medallion that was carved with countless figures of ghosts and deities, hovering and moving gracefully. Wu Qi shook his head. This medallion was also a rare treasure, but it was definitely not the aura he sensed just now. That aura was at least one grade higher than the medallion. When the medallion appeared, the strong light that burst out from the turtle shell became stronger and stronger, but the figures of mountains, rivers, and human figures were still blurry and indistinct. Giguzi frowned. He cried out in a low voice and pointed his finger out. A dim white light shot out from his fingertip. Immediately, the ancient and obscure aura reappeared. Giguzi frowned and gave the white light a look. He clenched his jaws and seemed to have made up his mind. He bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the white light. Chapter 258. What is this? Wu Qi gave the white light a glance, and immediately his heart began to pound violently. Fortunately, he had gotten used to cultivating the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing. Right after his heart beat, he immediately concealed his aura with a mystic technique, and the sound of his heart beating was also confined within a 10-feet circumference area with a secret spell. Before the sound and aura could spread out, it was strangled in the bud by Wu Qi. Giguzi and Ingzing, who were standing on the opposite mountaintop, had no idea that Wu Qi had been drenched in cold sweat because of the scare. With a solemn expression, Giguzi walked slowly around the turtle shell, while Ingzing looked worriedly at Giguzi, who kept coughing out blood onto the white light. Amidst the white light was a simple and small piece of turtle shell. On its surface, it was drawn with a handwriting that looked like a child's scribble, depicting the 9 palaces, 8 trigrams, and some other messy patterns. At first glance, it looked like a trick made by a child. However, if one gave it a closer look, one would find that every single pattern and trace on the turtle shell was formed by nature, without the slightest trace of artificial manipulation. Obviously, it was a spirit item that was formed by the heaven and earth. The patterns and the messy traces next to the 9 palaces and 8 trigrams were actually pieces of complicated and abstruse runes. They were the primordial divine script that appeared in Wu Qi's mind when he inherited the Scroll of Stealing. Every single character contained the rules of the heaven and earth, and represented the power of the Tao of the heaven and earth. Every single character could represent countless primordial divine script that contained countless meanings. The patterns and traces on the turtle shell only added up to 49 primordial divine script. However, when they were combined together, they formed an extremely complicated and abstruse cultivation technique that contained several tens of thousands of words. Carefully, Wu Qi gave the turtle shell a glance. He recognized that most of the words in this cultivation technique were words like heaven and earth stars, heavenly dipper, and earthly evilness, ghost deity spell, destiny, and human destiny. Wu Qi recalled the description of various spirit items found in the Scroll of Stealing. In the ancient times, during the era of the human emperor, there was a dragon horse that carried the river map on its back. Everyone knew that the river diagram was a piece of jade, but no one knew that there was actually a copy of the river diagram. What was recorded on the jade plate was the general outline of the river diagram, and the supplementary volume of the river diagram had a total of 9 tortoiseshells. What was recorded were the various practical techniques of the river diagram. This should be a primordial spiritual treasure. Wu Qi stared blankly at the tortoiseshell and completely gave up on the idea of stealing it. Without sufficient strength, it was best not to get close to such a Xiantian treasure. Otherwise, there would definitely be a calamity. This was also the lesson that the shadowy figure who inherited the Scroll of Stealing had given to Wu Qi over and over again. Acquired spirit items could be stolen at any time, but innate spirit items should never be stolen recklessly. Unless it was an innate earth element energy essence that had yet to take form, as long as it was an innate spirit object that had taken form, unless the cultivator had a sufficient cultivation base, he would never touch it, as it would definitely kill him. Surprisingly, the turtle shell that Gueguzi withdrew was one of the copies of the river map. With Gueguzi's cultivation base of nascent divinity realm, how was it possible for him to freely control such an innate spirit item? Therefore, he could only refine it with his own blood essence, using a method similar to blood sacrifice, and barely borrow a tiny bit of natural energy from the supplementary volume. As mouthful after mouthful of blood sprayed out from his mouth, the shadowy figures of mountains and rivers, humans and animals that came shooting out from the huge turtle shell in front of Gueguzi gradually became clearer. Gradually, the shadowy figures showed the scene of Ingjing sitting on a chariot, flying forward together with all his ministers. However, Gueguzi's face had also turned pale, and his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Standing next to him, Ingjing's face was twitching. Abruptly, he dropped to his knees, kowtowed and said, "Old mister, your blood essence is too precious. I think it's better that you don't waste your prime blood essence. With this blood sacrifice technique, Zing can just extract several tens of thousands of condemned prisoners and slaughter them to make up the number." Gueguzi took a deep breath. While still exercising the spell, he scolded in a low voice, "Ridiculous! How can the Tao of heaven and earth be deceived like this? The cultivation base and attainment of Tao belong to oneself, and only then it belongs to oneself. I don't want to borrow external force. Remember, there is no shortcut in the path of cultivation. Today, you've killed 100,000 condemned prisoners and used the supplementary volume of the heavenly book to divine the fate of the human emperor. In the future, when you meet a stronger opponent, how many condemned prisoners can you slaughter to serve you? 1 million? 10 million? Or, for the sake of a divination, you'll kill all the people of Daqin?" Ingjing's face turned deathly pale. He stared blankly at Gueguzi, and only after a long while did he give Gueguzi 3 loud kowtows and said, "Old mister, you're right. I, Zing, have been blinded by power. For a spirit item like this, it's better for me to slowly refine and master it with my own cultivation base." Gueguzi's eyes were fixed on the 2 turtle shells, one big and one small, and from time to time he coughed out mouthfuls of blood at the supplementary volume of the river map. Then he said coolly, "Although it seems to be strenuous for me now, when I'm using this supplementary volume of the heavenly book, I'm also constantly using my own blood essence to refine it. If I were to use the blood essence of the condemned prisoners, I would be able to temporarily unleash its power to the limit. But, if the blood essence of those condemned prisoners contaminates this heavenly book, and in the future, I'll have to spend 100 or even 1,000 times more effort to slowly refine it. Doesn't that mean the loss outweighs the gain?" While he was speaking, the supplementary volume of the river map gradually emitted wisps of white light, shooting into the huge turtle shell underneath. Countless shadows of ghosts and deities emerged from the surrounding void. They stood reverently beside Gueguzi, receiving the nourishment from the dark mist that shot out from the medallion hovering above his head. Nourished by the dark mist, these shadows of ghosts and deities gradually became clearer. Abruptly, they transformed into chilly gusts of wind, wheeling and wheeling around the huge turtle shell. A bright light burst out from the turtle shell, and a clear image appeared on it. Ingjing sat complacently in the chariot, bringing with him many civilian and military officials, and escorted by a large number of soldiers as they flew forward in a mighty formation. Very soon, they arrived at a beautiful place with green hills and green waters and blooming flowers. Not far away from the green waters, there was a group of 17 hot springs that were connected together. Vaguely, one could see some naked and beautiful girls soaking in the hot springs, laughing and playing merrily. Ingjing said with a deep voice, "Old mister, His Majesty is bringing people to find these girls. It is said that one of the girls is cultivating some strange cultivation technique, the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su, which has nourished a thread of innate dark yin qi in her body. If His Majesty were to take her body by force, with His Majesty's current cultivation base, he would be able to break through to the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal. His Majesty's plan is to break through to the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, then find that whinnying demon dragon and settle the score with him, seizing his original dragon blood essence and forming the first stage of the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. Gui Guzi's face was gloomy, as he kept running quickly around the turtle shell without saying a word. The young boys and girls standing next to him were gently waving the long streamers around him. Then, stars began to appear in the sky, and specks of starlight began to fall down like raindrops, sprinkling onto the streamers. Then, the young boys and girls began to recite some incantations in a low voice. Countless silver threads shot out from the streamers, fusing into the bodies of those ghosts and deities who had transformed into chilly winds and were wheeling restlessly in the surroundings. Suddenly, the aura of these ghosts and deities became a few times stronger. They let out joyful laughter, while wave after wave of abstruse energies kept spreading in all directions. Vaguely, Ying Zheng and Yu Yao's laughter could be heard coming from the light and shadow shot out from the turtle shell. After that, the chariot suddenly flew forward, rushing towards the group of 17 hot springs. Then, they saw Baichi bringing a large group of soldiers and charging towards the several thousand soldiers of Great Chu with a murderous aura. They formed a battle formation and charged towards those soldiers. Then they saw Su Fu and Li Si bringing a large group of practitioners, rolling up runes and flames that blotted the sky, pressing down towards the several tens of thousands of mountain spirits and water ghosts who soared up into the sky from the lake. After that, the light and shadow shattered abruptly, leaving only a large sheet of white mist wheeling and wheeling around the turtle shell, and nothing could be seen clearly. Ying Zing cried out sternly, "Old mister? What's wrong?" Gigazi was shocked as he said, "Someone has an exceedingly mighty technique of ghosts and deities, which has covered the heavenly secrets and destiny within an area of 1,000,000 miles in circumference. My divination of His Majesty's aura has been completely twisted by someone, and I can no longer predict His Majesty's current situation. The soul seals I left on His Majesty, Su Fu, and Li Si have also been covered by someone with a great force. I can't even find out where they are right now." Ying Zing cried out in panic, "Who else can compare with you, old mister, in this technique of yin and yang ghost?" Gigazi spun a few rounds around the turtle shell at high speed, then cried out sternly, "Chu Ping, only Chu Ping." Great Chu and barbarians lived together, and in those years, the Magisprius of Great Chu were the experts in the art of divination of ghosts and deities, while the barbarians were the experts in the divine abilities of ghosts and deities. With both of them combined, if there is someone who can deceive my Ghost Valley divination, it is only Chu Ping. Furthermore, the manpower and material resources he used are not something to be underestimated. Clenching his teeth, Gigazi cried out sternly, "Ying Zing." Ying Zing sprung to his feet and cried out loudly, "Here!" Gigazi cried out in a deep voice, "Even without divination, I can still predict what they are trying to do. His Majesty is in danger, and Daqin is in danger. Quickly activate all teleportation formations, and mobilize all the armies and practitioners that can be dispatched from Xianyang City at all costs. Bring them to Meng Mountains to rescue His Majesty. Great Chu and Great Yen have joined hands." Before his words could fade away, a stream of dark mist burst out from the top of Gigazi and Ying Zing's heads. 36 undead men, each standing 10,000 feet tall and surrounded by countless ghosts and deities, shot out from the dark mist in a mighty manner. The leader of these ghosts and deities was a Yin deity, clad in a marquee robe and holding a jade seal in his hand. He had a dignified appearance and looked like an emperor of the mortal world. With a large seal in his hand, he was controlling all the undead men and ghosts and deities, summoning countless dark winds and dark clouds to surround the lone peak. The Yin deity stared at Gigazi and cried out sternly, "Are you Mr. Gigu? His Majesty of Great Chu has ordered us to mobilize all 36,000 ghosts and deities, just to ask old Mr. to meditate here for 6 hours." Stealthily, Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe, and he saw a tremendous energy ripple emanating from the large seal in the Yin deity's hand. It had completely sealed off the space around the lone peak, and the flow of time on the peak had been slowed down a few times as well. Roughly a day had passed in the outside world, but only less than 2 hours had passed on the peak. Gigazi looked at the sky full of ghosts and deities, shook his head and said, "What a powerful divine ability, what a powerful dermic power. You can actually accurately locate the location of my true form through the changes of the natural forces brought about by my divination. Chu Ping's Tao of ghosts and deities has indeed reached an unfathomable realm. But too bad, if you want to deal with me, this is far from enough." Under the pressure exerted by the joint forces of all the ghosts and deities, Gigazi suddenly pointed his finger out. Immediately, the streamers held in the hands of those boys and girls burst out with a blinding golden light. Like a melted golden glass, a large sheet of golden flame shot out in all directions, bringing with it a frighteningly high temperature and blinding light. The true flame of the sun, the one that can incinerate everything. Gigazi cried out, "Chu Ping, the true flame of the sun is the thing that all ghosts and deities fear the most. How could these wild ghosts and deities of yours defeat me?" Wu Qi could not help but suck in a cold breath. Gigazi truly lived up to his reputation as Gigazi. Hidden within the long starry streamer that he used to control ghosts and deities and increase their ferocious power was the true flame of the sun, which was powerful enough to annihilate all ghosts and deities. It was a very cunning and vicious method. Even Wu Qi had never thought that a ghost-controlling magical item could be crafted in such a way. Once the true flame of the sun was unleashed, the entire place was filled with wailing cries. Chapter 259. These poor ghosts and deities were all otherworldly items, and even sunlight could weaken most of their power. Now, when they were burned by the true sun flame, which was purified from the sunlight, several thousand ghosts and deities with the weakest cultivation base immediately turned into chilly winds and drifted away. A few ghosts and deities who stood at the forefront, emanating divine will that was as strong as a nascent soul cultivator, were also burned by the true sun flame. They immediately let out miserable howls and fled into the sky with thick smoke billowing behind them. To these ghosts and deities, the threat of the true sun flame was like arsenic to ordinary people. When the true sun flame burned these ghosts and deities, wherever the flame touched, their bodies would immediately turn into smoke. They did not have fleshly bodies to rely on, and their bodies were formed by their souls and nascent divinities. What the true sun flame burned was their souls. The pain that was directly inflicted on the souls made the injured ghosts and deities let out the most shrill and unpleasant howls in the world, while the ghosts and deities who were lucky enough to not be burned by the true fire were frightened by the sound of it and kept retreating. When Wu Qi saw those ghosts and deities who were thrown into confusion by the true sun flame, he could not help but let out a loud laugh. He pulled out a piece of black cloth and covered his face, then twisted his body and shrunk a little. Wrapping himself with a green cloak, Wu Qi leaped out from the cliff with a strange smile on his face. "Old Mr. Gigazi, don't be afraid. I've long heard of old Mr's great reputation, and I've come to help you today." He opened his mouth and spat out the acquired pearl of fire element, which came whistling through the air and smashed onto two ghosts and deities whose aura was similar to that of a nascent divinity cultivator, and 7 ghosts and deities whose cultivation base was comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator. The acquired pearl of fire element was condensed with the essence of acquired fire element, and possessed a high temperature of pure yang. It was also the nemesis of all ghosts and deities. 9 powerful Yin deities howled miserably at the same time. Dark smoke billowed from their bodies as they were burned by the crimson acquired pearl of fire element. An enormous flame of pure yang rushed into their bodies like an icy cold aura, making them unable to move. Laughing wildly, the spirit-breeding ring on Wu Qi's finger suddenly burst out with a large sheet of white light, forcibly pulling all the severely wounded ghosts and deities into it. There were longbow men who were full of vigor waiting for these severely wounded ghosts and deities in the ring, and it was definitely not a pleasant experience. Riding on the acquired magnetic sword beam, Wu Qi transformed into a black beam of light and streaked across the void at top speed. Everywhere he went, the acquired spirit fire pearls would be smashed and thrown randomly, filling the entire sky with raging red flames. Caught unprepared, several hundred ghosts and deities were severely wounded by him, howling miserably as they were devoured by the spirit-breeding ring. After forcefully abducting hundreds of ghosts and deities, Wu Qi let out a loud cry and left on his sword. Among the countless ghosts and deities behind him, 3 of the 36 10,000 feet tall zombies had already fixed their attention on Wu Qi. Seeing that Wu Qi had killed a large number of ghosts and deities that came with him, these zombie Qi let out a muffled snort, opened their mouths and spat out a scarlet flame. The flame was hot enough to melt gold and iron, and contained a poisonous miasma unique to zombies, and turned the entire heaven and earth into a fiery red color. Together with a monstrous murderous aura, it came roaring towards Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi was not willing to risk his life to fight these undead creatures. He had already obtained enough benefits. With just a blink of an eye, he was already several tens of miles away. Impatiently, he transformed into a faint yellow beam and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had gone several miles deep into the ground. 3 undead zombies followed closely behind Wu Qi, and in just a blink of an eye, they had arrived above the mountain ridge. When they saw Wu Qi plunging into the ground, all 3 undead zombies opened their mouths at the same time and sprayed out a large sheet of raging flame. Amidst a series of sizzling noises, a few lofty mountains were melted into lava by the raging flame, and the crimson flame burned all the way to the rock stratum 1 mile deep into the ground. Only then did the 3 undead zombies stop attacking. They leaped up and flew towards the lone peak where Gigazi was, joining the siege. But, first, the true flame of sun had forced away all the ghosts and deities, and now, Wu Qi had come to disrupt the situation. As a result, a few gaps had been opened up in the formation formed by the ghosts and deities and 36 undead zombies. Gigazi pointed his finger at the medallion of ghosts and deities hovering above his head, uttered a faint incantation, grabbed Ingzing and threw him out. With a blink of his body, Ingzing abruptly transformed into a ghost, and with a few blinks, he disappeared without a trace in the void. Not long after that, the sound of drums and bugles suddenly rang out from the Qin army's campsite. Countless practitioners and soldiers of Qin army soared into the sky like a swarm of crazy hornets, forming a tight defensive line in the void. In the woods surrounding the Qin army's campsite, numerous large teleportation formations, each measuring over 10 miles in diameter, burst out with blinding lights, while faint spatial ripples shook the surrounding woods and trees. The Qin army had spent a huge amount of energy stones to activate the teleportation formation that connected to Xianyang City. A faint smile emerged on Gigazi's face as he looked at the ghosts and deities hovering above his head and the 36 giant undead zombies, then said, "I'm proud of my meticulous planning. It was I who sensed the danger Your Majesty was in a few years in advance when Your Majesty was in danger. Therefore, I brought my men and countless energy stones and formation discs to rescue Your Majesty. Little did I expect that I would meet a worthy opponent today, as Chu Ping actually has the ability to conceal me from probing the heavenly secret. Wonderful. The most difficult thing in life is to find a worthy opponent." Gigazi smiled, shook his head and said, "Sun Kuang is my good friend, and Mod is the Grand Master of Mo sect. Both of them are not easy to deal with. Chu Ping is the Emperor of Great Chu. No matter it is his identity or cultivation base, he is a perfect match for me to fight him with all my abilities." Gigazi sighed. Suddenly, the countless evil ghosts and ferocious deities enshrouded in the medallion of ghosts and deities above his head began to wiggle and wriggle. Amidst shrill howls, tens of thousands of ghosts and deities clad in black armor leaped out from the medallion, howling and charging towards the many ghosts and deities on the perimeter. In just a blink of an eye, the 2 armies of ghosts and deities had engaged in a fierce battle. However, the battle between ghosts and deities was different from the battle between human cultivators. It was difficult for them to harm each other with their divine abilities, so they could only use the most direct method of devouring and absorbing to finish off their opponents. They were like 2 packs of wild beasts that had gone berserk, tangling together and devouring the bodies of their enemies, digesting them and transforming them into their own strength. The 36 giant undead Chi-Chi let out a furious roar. Shrouded in a layer of dark poisonous miasma, he swung his huge fists and smashed them down towards Gigazi's head. Gigazi shook his head and pointed the writing brush in his hand. Abruptly, a large sheet of strong light burst out from the giant turtle shell before him, transforming into a thick layer of light that shielded his entire body. He kept chanting an incantation and circulating his energy, while the writing brush kept pointing on the supplementary volume of the river map. As the tip of the brush kept pointing, specks of starlight lit up on the surface of the turtle shell, which happened to correspond to some stars in the sky. Accompanied by a light buzzing noise, silver starlight the size of a water tank kept falling down from the sky. Each starlight was as heavy as a mountain and as sharp as a blade. When the starlight fell on the bodies of these giant undead, it would easily pierce through their bodies and leave large, transparent holes. The silver starlight was still lingering on the wounds of these undead, constantly corroding their fleshly bodies and burning them to the point that plumes of dark smoke kept rising from their bodies. The giant undead opened their mouths at the same time and sprayed out their most powerful crimson flame. The fierce flame towered up into the sky, shrinking Gigazi's defensive barrier by a few times. The 108 little boys and girls behind him did not even have the time to let out a miserable cry before they were all turned into ashes amidst the flame. The corner of Gigazi's eyes twitched as he cried out in a low voice, "Evil creatures, evil creatures! Even if I have to consume some of my own energy today, I will kill all of you." He took a deep breath and sprayed out another mouthful of blood essence onto the supplementary volume of the river map. Relying on the formidable power of this innate spirit item, Gigazi was locked in a bitter stalemate with the 36 undead that had a cultivation base close to early-stage nascent divinity realm. He kept using the starlight to kill and injure these undead. At the same time, his own magical power and cultivation base were being squeezed out by the 36 giant undead and were shrinking bit by bit. Far off in the distance, Chu Ping, who was standing on a lofty mountain and watching Yingzheng laughing and playing in the hot spring, suddenly had his expression flickered. He laughed under his breath and said, "What a good old Mr. Gigazi. I can't believe he still can't be suppressed by this. I didn't expect that he, also, has the supplementary volume of the Heavenly Book. Chu Ping, it's a good chance for us to determine the winner." Then he cupped his fist at Yen Dan, smiled and said, "Old Mr. Gigazi is too difficult to deal with. Chu Ping will activate the formation and use its power to fight the enemy from a distance. I'll leave this place to your majesty, Yen Dan." With a solemn expression, Yen Dan cupped his fist back and said, "Well said, well said. If we can get rid of Yingzheng today, it will be a blessing for both our dynasties. Your majesty, you can just do whatever you want. I'm here and you must kill Yingzheng at all costs." Both men looked at each other and smiled, then cupped their fists and bowed to each other at the same time. Suddenly, a few shadows of ghosts and deities emerged around Chu Ping, quickly escorting him as they flew towards a formation not far away from them, where gusts of chilly wind towered into the sky. A gap was opened up in the formation, allowing Chu Ping to fly into it. After that, the formation quickly returned to its original state. Before long, an enormous energy wave spread out from the formation, and the surrounding natural energies began to fluctuate violently and violently. Near the hot spring, Baichi was still leading a large group of soldiers, encircling and annihilating those great Chu soldiers in high spirits. Above the lake, Su Fu and Li Si were still entangled with those mountain spirits and water ghosts. Vaguely, pinkish mists could be seen rising from the surrounding woods, and were gradually inhaled into the bodies of Baichi and the others. Their eyes were wavering as they had forgotten why the enemies, who had been in a stalemate with them for such a long time, were still showing up in an endless stream. The number of enemies they had killed was more than enough to fill up the entire woods, but there were still more enemies that kept coming out from the woods. These were weak enemies, and they could kill many of them with just a random rune or a casual slash. But they kept coming out from the woods like a never-ending stream of bugs. Meanwhile, Baichi and the others had also ignored this strange scene, and were caught in an endless slaughter. Right at this moment, a few nascent soul cultivators, who were covered in blood and had their bodies pierced through by sharp weapons, missing arms and legs, and one of them even had half of his head chopped off, rushed out from behind. They were followed closely by several hundred great yen cultivators, who kept unleashing various thunder sword beams to attack them. While withstanding the attacks, they kept sprinting towards Baichi while blood sprayed out from their mouths. "Prince of Wuan, what are you doing?" One of the Earth Immortals from Qin army let out a shrill howl. "This is an ambush, a trap. This place has been set up with the enchanting Heavenly Fox formation and Great Chu's art of ghosts and deities. Our king is being attacked by someone, and why are you still entangled with those illusions?" When these Earth Immortals arrived next to Baichi and the others, a few of them suddenly exploded their nascent souls. The huge explosion destroyed the surrounding mountainous terrain, and the pink mist was swept away by the explosion, leaving not a trace behind. Countless shadows of ghosts and deities could be seen flashing and disappearing in the surrounding air, while the shrill ghost howls shook the eardrums of those who heard them. The last remaining Earth Immortal threw an arrow to Baichi, who had just woken up with a start, and said, "Prince of Wuan, this is the formation map of the ambush in the vicinity. Do not get close to those red areas. All the war machines from Mo sect are lying in ambush over there. Only by going through those red areas will you have a slim chance of survival." Baichi was struck with terror. Suddenly, a stream of white mist shot up into the sky from the top of his head, and he threw his head back and let out a deafening tiger roar. Chapter 260. Underneath the 17 hot springs, several thousand beautiful and enchanting fox girls with 1 to 5 long white tails were seen sitting cross-legged in a large cave, chanting incantations soundlessly and performing hand incantation gestures. Behind each fox girl, there were hundreds to thousands of ghostly figures floating in the air. These female ghosts were also sitting cross-legged, their bodies shrunk to the limit of their ability, and were injecting their pure energy essence into the bodies of these fox girls, transforming them into the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox and spreading it out. The enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox was the natural body fragrance of the fox girls from the 9-tailed Heavenly Fox clan, and it could bewitch all sentient beings under the heaven. When faced with the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox, even a divine gold immortal dared not say that he could guard against its strange power. Unless one's cultivation base was 1 realm higher than the Heavenly Fox, or one had a powerful treasure to protect one's mind, the power of the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox was unstoppable. Several thousand fox girls of different cultivation bases were using mystic arts to stimulate their own blood essence, emitting a very strong enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox. On top of that, they were also replenished by the energy essence of countless female ghosts, which made the energy in their bodies stronger, their magic power and energy essence stronger, and made the power of the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox even more irresistible. The enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox, which was powerful enough to make even Heaven Immortals tumble, slowly poked out of the ground through a formation that had been set up beforehand, spreading out and suffusing an area of 100 miles in circumference. Baichi, Su Fu, Li Si, and many others were bewitched by the formation that Su Mayor's enchanting palace had set up beforehand with the help of wisterias, flowers, forests, and topography, and their minds were shaken by the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox. That was why they were bewitched by the countless illusions in the formation. They did not realize that their enemies were no longer the real soldiers of Great Chu, nor were they the mountain spirits and water ghosts. Those enemies had long retreated, and they were just wasting their energy in vain. 30% of the enchanting scent produced by these fox girls had bewitched Baichi and his company with the help of the enchanting formation, while the remaining 70% of the enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox went through an underground fire vein and into the 17 hot springs above, exploding out with the hot springs as the core. The strong enchanting scent of Heavenly Fox was mixed with the naked bodies of the beautiful girls in the hot springs, as well as the faint fragrance emanating from their bodies. Not only in Zheng, even Yuyao, who was sitting in the chariot and looking around vigilantly, was secretly controlled by the enchanting scent. Yu Yao sat cross-legged in the chariot, looking down at Yingjing, Yutan, and Yi, with a smile on her face. She seemed to be in a trance, and no one knew what was on her mind. The surroundings were beautiful, and the atmosphere Ling's spirits. The surrounding flowers and trees, even the shape of the smallest blade of grass, and the position of a stone by the hot spring, had all been meticulously arranged by the six-tailed heavenly fox, Su Mi. If there was even the slightest killing intent directed at Yu Yao right now, she would immediately wake up from this dreamlike charming atmosphere. Seal. And Ing spirit too and tails and came. Ing, the imperial seal was hovering in the air, drifting lazily, not emitting any power or aura. The imperial seal was no longer needed here. What was needed here was Ing Zheng's strong body and his nearly endless energy. Not knowing when Qi Bin and Lu Mei, together with their serving ladies, were lying in the hot springs. Their clothes were half covered, revealing a large patch of their fair skin. They were filled with an indescribable enchanting and bewildering aura. Yuji had long pressed her body against Ing Zheng's back, gently caressing his strong and powerful body. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Your Majesty, Your Majesty!" Yuji's red lips gently kissed the skin on Ing Zheng's back. Her murmurs made Ing Zheng more and more excited. 50% of the enchanting scent of heavenly fox, which was emanating from the several thousand fox girls underground, was focused on Ing Zheng. Ing Zheng's body was crimson like fire, and the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent were flashing and flashing behind his back. All his spirit, energy, and spirit were focused on the erect bulge on his lower body. Yutan fell weakly into the hot springs. A stream of bright red blood stained her lower body, making Ing Zheng's eyes turn bloodshot. Like a madman, he began to whip her crazily. The sound of flesh slamming against each other kept ringing out. Ing Zheng kept exercising the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, channeling the cooling aura that came from Yutan's body into every part of his body. When these cooling auras rushed into Ing Zheng's body, they felt cold like ice, but once they entered his body, they quickly exploded like a bomb, turning into rolling hot streams that rushed through his entire body. Through his divine will, Ing Zheng could sense that his energy was constantly improving. His nascent divinity was also gradually condensing, becoming stronger and stronger. His long hair was fluttering in the wind. This kind of pleasure caused by the continuous increase in his cultivation level stimulated him to whip the beauty under him even more forcefully, squeezing her body even more forcefully, wishing that he could squeeze out every trace of essence in her body. "Li Yuan, what's the point of following that old fool Huang Xie? If you follow me, you will only get benefits. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, and you will enjoy endless benefits." While doing his best to violate the beautiful girl beneath him, Ing Zheng exercised the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, and at the same time, he did not forget to promise all kinds of benefits to the beautiful girl beneath him. All the girls in the hot springs were wearing strange smiles on their faces, looking at Ing Zheng shyly. A great amount of fragrance kept spreading out from their bodies, turning into an aphrodisiac scent that kept rushing into Ing Zheng's body. When the scent entered Ing Zheng's body, it felt as cold as Xianbing. But when it entered his body, it quickly turned into boiling molten iron, flowing everywhere in his body. Stimulated by these hot streams, Ing Zheng's energy essence became more and more restless, like a pack of black bears in a spring night, eager to do something. His body trembled, and Ing Zheng let out a deep, deep roar. He hugged the beautiful girl beneath him tightly, and his body began to tremble violently. The muscles on his body tightened, revealing the distinct contours of his muscles. The trembling lasted for the time it took to finish a pot of tea. When the trembling stopped, the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent hovering above his head suddenly dimmed a little. A small part of the enormous true essence qi that he had painstakingly cultivated had already been injected into the body of the woman beneath him. The girl had her limbs tightly wrapped around Ing Zheng's body. Her skin had taken on a pinkish hue, and her eyes were narrowed, giving her a delicate and tender look. In fact, the energy in her body was rushing and surging. Like a puddle of heated nitric acid, the pinkish energy essence was crazily corroding and devouring the energy essence in Ying Zheng's body. When facing a cultivator like Ying Zheng, even if he was secretly restrained by the mystifying formation, as long as he sensed a tiny bit of killing intent towards him, he would immediately wake up. With the protection of the Cauldron of Yu, the Imperial Seal, and many other extraordinary treasures, with just a thought in his mind, no external force could ever hurt him. Only by using such a romantic tactic, using such a method of killing without spilling blood, could Ying Zheng's formidable cultivation base be slowly whittled away. When his energy essence was completely depleted, no matter how strong he was, how could he, a dragon without muscles and bones, be a match for a mangy dog? Only such a dissolute trick could deceive a peerless hero like Ying Zheng. Any other traps or ambushes would be the same as what happened to Xiang Yu. As long as there was even a tiny bit of killing intent, they would not be able to hide from their senses. The romantic tactic of Enchanting Palace, the natural aura of heaven and earth from Great Chu's ghosts and deities, as well as the natural energies from the surrounding mountains and rivers, had concealed all the unusual auras. That was the reason why the Deqin dynasty, which had countless experts and counselors, had suffered such a great loss. On top of that, Chu Ping had spent a great amount of effort and mental energy, using 36,000 ghosts and deities to construct a formation to conceal the heavenly secret, and even attacking Giguzi directly. If it were some other deadly trap, and if Chu Ping had not used his great divine ability to conceal the heavenly secret, once Ying Zheng set out, Giguzi would have triggered a thread of the power of destiny and would have given a warning in advance. It would not be so easy to make Ying Zheng fall into the current predicament. The lady who was having sex with Ying Zheng, Yu Ji, was the transformation of a five-tailed heavenly fox with the strongest cultivation base in Enchanting Palace. And the one who had transformed into Yu Tan was the six-tailed heavenly fox, one of the five demon kings of Meng Mountains, Su Meier. She had used all her power, and even used some of the ancestral spirit items of Enchanting Palace, to keep Ying Zheng and Yu Yao pinned down here, putting Ying Zheng into a very awkward situation where he could run out of energy at any time. Su Meier was hugging Ying Zheng tightly, her body constantly welcoming his thrusts. As a six-tailed heavenly fox, Su Meier had experienced at least 98,000, if not 100,000, members of the opposite sex. She had mastered all kinds of enchanting techniques to the acme of perfection. The bloodline of the nine-tailed heavenly fox was, after all, the evildoers under the heaven were the most skilled in enchanting the opposite sex. Even if you were a supreme human emperor, you could not keep the last thread of clarity in your heart before a nine-tailed heavenly fox. Many years ago, King Zhou of Shang was bewitched by a demon fox, and now, it was the same for Ying Zheng. Su Meier's prime enchanting fragrance kept rushing into Ying Zheng's body, like pouring oil onto a raging fire. It stimulated Ying Zheng's innate energy and made his nascent divinity to unleash its full potential. All these were illusions, like the illusions produced when one's spirit was stimulated after consuming some specific drugs. Amidst the amorous trap created by Su Meier, several thousand fox girls, and several 100,000 female ghosts, Ying Zheng's enormous innate energy was constantly being sucked into Su Meier's body, turning into her own cultivation base. High up in the sky, on top of the white clouds, a vague shadow of a six-tailed white fox could be vaguely seen. It was the manifestation of Su Meier's nascent divinity, as she could no longer control the demon energy that was growing rapidly in her body. On the white fox's buttocks, a new white tail was about to grow. Once the seventh tail grew out, Su Meier would immediately step into the ranks of heaven immortals. With her original cultivation base, together with Ying Zheng's enormous and pure dragon energy essence, it was more than enough to push Su Meier's cultivation base to the realm of heaven immortal. Sensing the magical transformation that was happening in her body, Su Meier clenched her jaws tightly. While letting out moans that could shake one's soul, she exercised the grand magic of Heavenly Fox and kept plundering Ying Zheng's enormous energy essence. The many girls who stood around Ying Zheng had their fingers gently pointed at the vital acupoints on his body. Using an evil technique that could stimulate one's potential and stimulate one's blood essence, they had stimulated the flow of Ing Zheng's blood and energies by several dozens of times, causing the energies in his body to rush out at an even faster speed. Ing Zheng's body was shivering, and his face had begun to turn pale. Pale like a dead man. Chapter 261. The explosion did not hurt Wu Qi at all, but the shockwave nearly made him cough out a mouthful of blood. His body was even thrown high up into the sky by the shockwave, and was thrown into the battlefield where Baiqi and his men were fighting fiercely. Baiqi, who was fighting with Fan Yuqi in midair, trembled. Looking down at the Qin soldiers who had suffered a great loss, he roared furiously, "Hey! How dare you help Great Yan to kill my soldiers? In the future, the Qin will definitely wipe out your Taoist sect." He could only watch helplessly as he slammed into Baiqi. Meanwhile, behind him, those men of sacrifice who had pledged allegiance to some unknown person were still exploding themselves again and again. Each time, 3 to 5 human immortals of Jin Dan would explode themselves. The shockwave made it impossible for him to adjust his direction, and all he could do was to slam into Baiqi like a cannonball. "You bastard!" Wu Qi roared furiously. While Baiqi was roaring furiously, Wu Qi suddenly sensed an extremely sharp arrow coming from his back, piercing straight towards the vital spot on his back. Bringing with him a great harvest, Wu Qi fled back to Meng Fortress. He had no intention of going to the place where Ing Zheng was trapped to find out the situation. It was a dangerous place, where countless experts from the 3 dynasties were fighting each other, and all sorts of powerful divine abilities and mystic techniques were being cast. He did not want to be accidentally struck by the shockwave of a magical technique, and be killed by someone for no apparent reason. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, several hundred Qin soldiers were killed. Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang threw their heads back and let out a long cry, then brought their soldiers and charged towards another group of Qin soldiers in the distance. Bringing with him a stream of green mist, they came near the battlefield where Li Exen was fighting another group of Qin soldiers. Wu Qi stretched out his hand and pulled out 3 powerful talismans made by Earth Immortals of Heavenly Spirit Sect, using them to lock onto Li Exen's body. While Xiang Zhuang was thrusting his sword towards Li Exen was dodging the attack by leaping up into the air, drawing his bow and releasing an arrow to counterattack. Wu Qi flicked his finger and burned all 3 talismans into ashes in an instant. In the void, a red cloud that looked like a burning flame rapidly gathered from all directions. 9 consecutive deafening claps of thunder rang out. 9 balls of lightning that were so bright that it was hard to open one's eyes exploded on Li Exen's body. The explosion shattered all the armor on his body, and his body suddenly stiffened. Just as Wu Qi was about to counterattack, 4 blurry figures suddenly rushed to his side and self-destructed without hesitation. A huge explosion reverberated throughout the entire battlefield. A bright light shot up into the sky. The 4 figures who self-destructed were all human immortals of middle-grade Jin Dan realm. Baiqi and the other mighty generals and civil officials of the Qin dynasty were awakened by the few Earth immortals who risked their lives to deliver the message. Right now, they were crazily attacking the direction of the hot spring. Without any delay, Wu Qi leaned his body forward, curled up into a meatball, and rolled down from the mountainside. A blue sword, about 6 feet long and about the width of a finger, so thin that it was nearly transparent, sliced through Wu Qi's back without making a sound. It was only a tiny space the size of a sesame seed, and Wu Qi's skin would have been cut open. The long sword was glinting with a colorful gleam, and vaguely dipped in some liquid. Obviously, it contained some strange poison. Fan Yuqi and Baiqi were tangled in a fierce battle. Tian Guang was fighting against Wang Jian smilingly, and Yu Yi was fighting against the skinny general who stood side by side with Baiqi and Wang Jian, a man with a high nose and sunken eyes. At the moment, 3 pairs of generals were fighting in the sky, while Yu Yi was laughing and yelling, "Meng Ao, Meo, you are also a famous general. Come, let us have a good fight." The speed at which Wu Qi rolled down the mountainside was getting slower and slower, and there were a few times when the long swords nearly sliced through his body. Loud booms echoed out, and a large sheet of flame had blanketed the ground 10 miles in circumference. The power of each round ball was at least 20 times stronger than the most lethal heavy bomb Wu Qi had ever seen on Earth. The destructive force produced by the explosion of just one round ball had blanketed the ground 1 mile in circumference. Hundreds of round balls exploded at the same time in a small area, and the tremendous shockwave sent several dozens of steel mammoths flying back into Great Yan's camp, crushing several thousand soldiers of Great Yan army to death. There were even some figures who were performing incantation gestures and scolding at Wu Qi in a low voice. Strange ripples of energy came assaulting like a tidal wave, trying to freeze Wu Qi's body in the air, making him unable to move. These strange machines should be the weapons of mass destruction created by the Jet Black sect. Sure enough, these weapons, which were created by combining the power of machines and Taoist puppets, possessed a mighty power. The power of those round balls was nearly equal to a full-force strike unleashed by a peak Jin Dan cultivator. Although several hundred round balls exploded at the same time, the captains of Qin army did not suffer any loss, but those elite soldiers of Qin army were either killed or wounded. The land tens of miles in circumference was filled with tattered corpses of Qin soldiers. Li Exin, it's you again. Filled with resentment, Wu Qi glared at Li Exin, who was fighting Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang with a bow in his hand. Then he twisted his body and borrowed the escape art of Greenwood to transform into a hazy green mist. Using the cover of the surrounding grasses and trees, he leaped toward the battlefield. Initially, he just wanted to return to Meng Fortress safely, but after being shot 3 times by someone for no reason, his anger had been ignited. Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang burst into loud laughter. Suddenly, a strong blood-red light burst out from their bodies, and their bodies expanded to the height of 30 feet. Fiend energies rolled and rocked around their bodies, while the blood-red light blanketed the area 10 miles in circumference. Together with nearly 1,000 Xiang clan soldiers with bloodshot eyes, they leaped forward and killed those captains and soldiers around Li Exin. Both Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang were experts comparable to nascent divinity cultivators, so how could those Qin captains and soldiers be a match for them? Before Bai Qitian and the other captains of Qin army could come up and fight these giant beasts, they suddenly opened their mouths, revealing the pitch-black metal cylinders inside. Bang! Loud noises were heard as several hundred round metal bullets, each the size of a water bucket, cast entirely from metal, engraved with numerous runes, and socketed with countless upper-grade fire element energy stones, had been shot out and plunged into the densest group of Qin soldiers. Lights and shadows twisted and turned in the air, as several dozens of vague and indistinct figures dashed out from the air, each holding a blue longsword of the same color. Soundlessly, they chased after Wu Qi. It seemed they were practicing some kind of strange escape art, as their bodies would disappear and reappear in the air, blinking and darting forward at top speed. In just a blink of an eye, they had caught up with Wu Qi, with several dozens of longswords raining down from all directions. While Wu Qi was looking around, several dozens of gigantic steel beasts, each roughly 100 feet tall and shaped like mammoths, roared furiously and charged out from the camp of Yan army. These steel beasts had huge mammoth tusks that were as sharp as blades, measuring 100 feet long. Whenever they swung their gigantic bodies, several hundred long mammoth tusks would slash through the air, cutting and cutting large groups of Qin soldiers down to the ground like blades in a paddy field. Wu Qi felt a tremendous force coming at him from all directions. Even though he had been cultivating the dragon transformation script for a few months, he could not withstand such a strong pressure. Hastily, he waved his left hand, transforming the earth element dragon scales shield into a sheet of yellow light that wrapped around his body. Then, 36,000 dragon scales shot whistling out from the shield, tightly protecting all the vital parts of his body. When Xiang Ta saw the advantage, his body flickered and came next to Li Exin, swinging the longsword in his hand and slashing brutally at Li Exion's waist. Li Exion let out a miserable howl. His armor was cut open by Xiang Ta's sword, and half of his waist was cut open by the longsword. A large amount of blood sprayed out from the wound. Li Xan dared not to fight against Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang anymore. Suddenly, a white Pegasus flew out from underneath him. The Pegasus spread its gigantic white wings and flapped them forcefully, bringing Li Xan along as it transformed into a white stream of light and shot towards the hot spring far away. The 3 arrows that nearly hit Wu Qi just now were shot out by Li Xan. A middle-ranking Chu general was killed by the arrows, and his body was swaying and falling to the ground. But the momentum of the arrows did not diminish, and they pierced straight through the ground, nearly nailing Wu Qi to the ground. "Oh my God!" Wu Qi cried out in a strange voice. While laughing delightfully, Wu Qi kept running crazily underground. He purposely took a detour and avoided the hot spring where Ying Zheng was trapped, fearing that he would be discovered by someone. Little did he know that the more he tried to avoid trouble, the trouble came to him. As he transformed into a clump of earthen mist and fled at top speed underground, 3 loud noises suddenly rang out from his left and right, as 3 blinding beams shot down from the sky, brushing past his body and piercing through his skin. The temperature of these beams was extremely high, and they were very powerful. When the beams brushed past Wu Qi's body, 3 large pieces of earthy energy were cut off by the violent ripples, which was equivalent to cutting off 3 pieces of flesh from Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi howled hoarsely because of the pain. Abruptly, his body transformed back into a human form, and he sprung out from the ground. Shockingly, there were 3 bottomless pits on the ground, each about 10 feet in diameter. A great amount of lava was constantly bursting out from the pits. The viscous, crimson lava was boiling and churning, while scorching bubbles kept popping and popping, slowly filling up the 3 pits. After unleashing the 3 talismans, Wu Qi had already fled several tens of miles away. Halfway up a mountain, he carefully raised his head and looked towards the direction of the hot spring. In that direction, the area near the 17 springs where Ying Zheng was trapped was still shrouded with a pinkish scent of ecstasy mixed with white steam. It was so hazy that he could not see anything clearly. Led by Bai Qitian and a group of captains, the several 100,000 soldiers led by Bai Qi and his men had formed a great formation and were charging towards the hot spring. However, near the hot spring, several tens of thousands of soldiers of Great Yen were operating several thousand strange and bizarre machines, forming into a camp and holding off the fierce attack of several 100,000 Qin soldiers. The sky was filled with raging flames and lightning bolts, and countless arrows were shooting out. No matter how fierce the attacks of the Qin army was, the camp formed by the powerful machines remained unaffected. However, with the elite soldiers of Great Chu led by Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang harassing them on the perimeter, and suddenly, the elite soldiers of Great Yen led by Fan Yuqi, Tian Guang, and Yu Yi had formed a battle formation and tightly surrounded the hot spring where Ying Zheng was trapped. How could Bai Qi and his men break into the hot spring in a short period of time? The reason why Jin Dan self-detonated was to kill and injure Wu Qi. These men were all loyal men of sacrifice. When he lifted his head up, he immediately saw Li Xian leading several hundred captains with bows in their hands, fighting with nearly 1,000 soldiers of Xiang clan led by Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang. Together with nearly 1,000 soldiers, Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang roared and roared as they charged fiercely towards Li Xian. Meanwhile, Li Xian and the captains around him were stepping on flying machines that could travel at an extremely fast speed, flying back and forth in the sky while constantly increasing the distance between them and Xiang Ta and the others. At the same time, they kept shooting dazzling arrows that looked like lightning bolts, killing one soldier after another. There were several hundred ghosts and deities imprisoned in the spirit-breeding ring, and they were being crazily trampled and ravaged by 100 burly men from the Long Bow Kingdom. As long as these unlucky ghosts and deities were refined by the divine flame of order, they would be turned into the purest source of soul energy, nourishing Wu Qi's soul and nascent divinity. With the power of these several hundred ghosts and deities, perhaps Wu Qi could possess a nascent divinity that could fight evenly against a nascent divinity cultivator while still in the Jin Dan realm? It was not impossible. Chapter 262. Wu Qi turned his head and gave the 3 ladies a look, then gave a deep look at Yu Ji, who acted as if nothing had happened. Hastily, he transformed into a stream of yellow mist and plunged into the ground. Lu Buwei had sent someone to assassinate Wu Qi, and he had made it very clear. No one could find fault with him. So, as the left prime minister of Great Yan Dynasty, Lu Buwei should not kill the ministers of Great Yan Dynasty? Furthermore, Wu Qi had killed his own granddaughter. So, how could that be considered? Yan Dan did not say a word. There was no such national law in Great Yan Dynasty that restricted the usage of assassins. No matter it was Jing Ku Tianguang or even Qin Huiyang, they were all assassins. Unknowingly and imperceptibly, Great Yan Dynasty had developed a trend of raising assassins, a killing tool known as assassins. When there was a conflict between two clans, using assassins was the most direct way to resolve the conflict. While letting out a long and furious howl, Wu Qi slammed his head into Baiqi from behind, who was fighting fiercely with Fan Yuqi. Dozens of human immortals of Jin Dan had self-detonated behind him, and the tremendous force of impact had made his speed incredibly fast. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi had crossed over 100 miles of distance, and was now less than 1,000 feet away from Baiqi's back. Wu Qi cried out helplessly. He looked at the dozens of vague figures behind him, then flicked his left wrist and shot out several hundred golden beams shaped like dragon scales, transforming into a stream of light and thrusting straight into Baiqi's back. Clang, 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 clang. Baiqi flicked his wrist. Each piece of the golden dragon scales weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, and each piece was terrifyingly fast. After hundreds of collisions, Baiqi could no longer hold his sword. A long rainbow flew out from his hand, and the sword was sent flying far away. Yu Yao had no other choice. The yellow light unleashed by the formation above her head instantly wrapped around her, transforming into tens of thousands of blades, spears, swords, halberds, and countless armors, blocking the attacks from Yu Tan and Yu Ji. Several loud explosions rang out, and Yu Yao was forced to retreat repeatedly. However, the two women did not show any mercy, and continued to launch attacks that were like a storm. Yu Yao was different from Yu Ji. She, who was better at scheming, did not have such a strong fleshly body. When she was hit by Wu Qi, who was like a small hill, she immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood, and more than half of her bones were broken. Along with the speed at which Wu Qi was flying, the shield struck out with a force of over 2 million kilograms, turning it into a frightening force and smashing right into Baiqi. Baiqi's breastplate was shattered, and a stream of blood burst out from his mouth. He was thrown several tens of miles away in a sorry state, and was finally embedded into the cliff of a lofty mountain. Wu Qi could not resist Yu Yao's attack at all. Like a yellow ball, he was knocked flying away by the flute. The tremendous impact made Wu Qi tremble from head to toe, and he nearly threw up a mouthful of blood. Sister, Ying Zheng is destined to die here today. Just let him go. Yu Tan chuckled, then swung the blade down viciously. The sword flew out of Baiqi's hand. Even though he had gone through hundreds of battles, he was taken aback. How dare you? How could this be? He cried out. Yu Yao cursed angrily. Just as she was about to aim the yellow beam unleashed by the formation above her head at Ying Zheng, a long crescent blade with coiling dragon emerged gracefully from behind her back, thrusting straight towards Yu Yao's slender neck. Baiqi's armor nearly shattered into pieces, while countless cracks appeared on his skin, and blood splashed and splashed in all directions. After being severely wounded by Wu Qi and Fan Yuqi, Baiqi took a deep breath. Abruptly, the murderous aura emanating from countless soldiers on the battlefield transformed into a white tiger-shaped airwave and rushed into his mouth. The wounds on Baiqi's skin healed quickly, while his broken bones and large wounds were restored to their original state. The murderous aura of Baiqi's white tiger soul-slaughtering technique could almost be compared with that of Xiangyu, but when it came to the strength and recovery of his fleshly body, it was far weaker than the body of immortal fiend which Xiangyu had inherited. On top of that, Fan Yuqi's brute force was terrifyingly strong, and the two tiger-headed crescent halberds were both weapons of magical treasure level. With that he had severely wounded Baichi with ease. Holding the two tiger-headed crescent halberds in his hands, Fan Yuqi's entire body was shrouded in a yellow glow, and his face was twisted as he fought fiercely with Baichi. Although Baichi's speed was at least 50% faster than Fan Yuqi's, his strength was much weaker than Fan Yuqi's. However, Baichi's fleshly body was definitely not as strong as Fan Yuqi's. He had adopted guerrilla tactics, as he dared not to fight head-on with Fan Yuqi, who was as tough as an iron block. Yu Yao was taken aback and she bellowed, "How dare you, demon girl?" Since it was a muddled matter, Yen Dan decided to just stand back and play dumb. Even Mod and Sun Kuang had nothing to say. After a brief moment of pondering, Yen Dan, Mod, Sun Kuang, and many other civil and military officials turned their eyes at the same time to look at Lu Buwei, who was standing silently behind Yen Dan like a ghost and was not even breathing. Lu Buwei, who had a stout and graceful appearance like an old man from a wealthy family, smiled faintly, raised his eyelids slightly, and said indifferently, "I did it. Do you have any objections?" Suddenly, Baichi sensed a mass of sharp energy shooting at him from behind. What shocked him even more was that the sharp energy was shooting right at the internal and external channels through which his white tiger spirit slaughtering kill incantation extracted killing energy and transformed it into his own energy. If these vital acupuncture points were attacked, Baichi's fighting strength would be greatly affected. Out of pure instinct, Baichi casually swung his sword behind him. Baichi, who was fighting Fan Yuqi, relied on his speed to circle around Fan Yuqi and hack at him. Fan Yuqi's armor was shattered, and hundreds of wounds opened up on his body. His entire body was covered in blood. However, as Fan Yuqi cultivated the earthly indestructible body, although his speed was slightly slower, his fleshly body defense was extremely strong. No matter how hard Baichi hacked at him, he was only injured but not killed. The injuries looked terrible, but in fact, they did not cause any fatal injuries to Fan Yuqi. Like a sharp blade, the fierce tiger tore through the wisps of pinkish and white mist in the air. Each of the dragon scales was extremely sharp, and because they contained a thread of innate earth element energy essence, constantly absorbing the earth element energy from the surrounding natural energy to replenish themselves, each of these dragon scales weighed more than 50,000 kilograms. The golden beams tore through the air and produced ear-splitting noises, shooting straight towards the 18 vital acupuncture points on Baichi's back with an immense killing intent. Under the observation of Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, these 18 vital acupuncture points were the passageways from Baichi's back, which were constantly absorbing the killing energies from the surrounding. Watching from afar, Yen Dan and all his ministers were startled by the sudden appearance of Wu Qi, especially when Wu Qi showed up in such a bizarre way. Like a cannonball, he shot towards Baichi, while several dozens of human figures were chasing after him, hacking at him with swords. From time to time, a few human figures would self-detonate behind him. Furthermore, all those who self-detonated had the cultivation base of Jin Dan's human immortal realm. In the twinkling of an eye, the remaining dozens of men of sacrifice had once again self-detonated behind Wu Qi's back. Wu Qi, who had just knocked Baichi flying away, let out a miserable howl as his body was once again thrown forward by the explosion, and the momentum was much stronger than before. While howling and howling, his body was shrouded by the bright yellow light transformed from the earth element energy, shooting straight into the ecstasy formation and slamming right into Yu Yao's body. Caught off guard, Yu Yao was thrown up into the air and flew tens of miles away, swaying and wobbling. With the cultivation base of Jin Dan, how could he do such a thing? Cried Yen Dan in shock. Who has such a deep grudge against Wu Qi? In Great Yen Dynasty, who has such a deep grudge against him? How could he be willing to use the men of sacrifice with the cultivation base of Jin Dan to assassinate Wu Qi? Bastard! Yu Yao bellowed furiously. The jade flute emanated a sheet of green light and smashed forcefully onto Wu Qi's body. Just as his chest heaved up, Baichi cried out sternly, "Your Majesty, Empress, wake up now. The situation is critical, wake up now." A cold gleam shot out from Lu Buwei's eyes, and for a moment he was emanating a threatening aura. Apart from a few people, all the civil and military officials of Great Yan Dynasty bowed their heads, not daring to meet Lu Buwei's gaze. Lu Buwei grinned coldly, raised his head up proudly and said, "Killing Wu Qi is a personal grudge, not an official mission. Which national law of Great Yan Dynasty says that I can't activate the assassins kept by my clan to assassinate my enemies?" Bai Qi threw his head back and let out a wild roar. White mist burst out from his body like a waterfall, and his voice sounded like the roar of a dragon, causing the clouds in the sky to sway and ripple. Amidst his long and sonorous roar, the murderous aura transformed from the countless Qin soldiers killed by the machines from Emo sect transformed into a ferocious tiger with blood stains all over its body. While letting out a drawn-out roar, the tiger sprung into the hot spring where Ying Zheng and Yu Yao were trapped by the formation. Then he waved the jade flute, and a tune as clear as the cry of a phoenix rang out. A pale yellow formation suddenly emerged above Yu Yao's head, shooting out a large sheet of majestic and solemn yellow flame towards the group of fox ladies who had trapped Ying Zheng. The many courtiers standing around Yen Dan exchanged glances, and none of them said a word. It was a fact that Wu Qi had offended many people. But, among these people he had offended, none of them would be so extravagant as to use the self-explosion of a Jin Dan human immortal to kill Wu Qi. Even Yu Yi, whose youngest son was killed by Wu Qi, would not send so many Jin Dan cultivators to assassinate Wu Qi by self-explosion. This time, Wu Qi did not flee. Instead, he hid under the ground watching the fight between the three ladies from a distance. Originally, Bai Qi should not be so useless. But when he forcibly controlled the bone of Dragon Ing last time, his cultivation base was severely damaged. Although he had used some spirit pills to heal and restore his cultivation base, it had only been a few months, and his current cultivation base was still far away from the peak stage nascent soul realm. His overall strength had been greatly weakened. On top of that, the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield was an innate magical item, which contained a massive amount of power. As Bai Qi had placed 70% of his attention on Fan Yuqi, he was caught off guard, and his sword was knocked away by Wu Qi. Yu Ji, who had changed into a bright red dress that was as red as fire, silently appeared beside Yu Yao like a ball of flame spirit. Two small fists pierced through the air with an ear-piercing sound as they smashed straight towards Yu Yao's ribs. At the same time, Wu Qi threw himself into Bai Qi's arms, smashing his left wrist shield forcefully onto Bai Qi's chest. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield was crafted using innate Earth Element Energy Essence, which weighed over 2 million kilograms. Although it was refined into a magical treasure by Wu Qi, to Wu Qi, it was as light as a feather, as if it weighed nothing. But to the others, it was as heavy as a huge mountain. Sitting in the chariot, Yu Yao's body trembled as if she had sensed something, and she abruptly rose to her feet. She glanced around in astonishment, then suddenly tightened her grip on the jade flute. A large sheet of bright light burst out from the feathers of the Luan phoenix, dispersing some of the enchanting pink scent in the surroundings. She calmed her mind and looked down, and she saw Ying Zheng being entangled by a group of beautiful girls. More or less, there were white fox tails poking out from the back of these girls, wrapping around Ying Zheng like a huge white cocoon. He was struck dumb for a moment, but Fan Yuqi did not. Seeing that Bai Qi's body turned stiff and was caught unprepared by Wu Qi, Fan Yuqi gave a muffled snort. A stream of yellow mist towered a few miles high from the top of his head, producing a loud whistle that sounded like the whistle of a huge ship. Then he thrust his halberd twice and viciously hit Bai Qi's body. One of the halberd pierced through Bai Qi's left rib, and the other smashed onto Bai Qi's right shoulder, nearly shattering half of his body. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.